Hello, Janksters, and welcome back to another episode of the MagicJank podcast. That's right, this is the show where members of Team MagicJank get together every week and we discuss the latest happenings in Magic the Gathering. And today, we have like one topic, and it's probably going to be a very long one. You at home can see the runtime. Now that we're just getting started, I can only imagine, but it's a big topic. We're going to be talking Ixalan spoilers, everybody. And we've seen a lot of the set, not quite the whole thing, but the majority of it at this point. And we have thoughts and feelings and whatnot. So we're going to be diving into those. My name is Graham. I go by Hamhux42 on the internet, and I'm joined by Steve Hervera Jr. Carlo, how you doing, my friend?
Hello, everybody.
And then also the myth, the man, the legend, HollywoodPizza himself. Pizza, how you doing, man?
Hey, how's everybody doing? Good to see everybody again.
All right, good to be here. So yeah, before we dive into the meat of the episode, I do want to give a huge shout out and a huge thank you to MagicJank.com, the sponsor and namesake of the show that is able to make this happen. So MagicJank.com is an online marketplace where you can buy and sell Magic the Gathering products and gear, as well as merch from your favorite streamers who happen to be members of Team MagicJank. So there's a lot of great stuff over there. If you have cards or even accessories that would appeal to an audience of Magic players, definitely think about signing up as a vendor over on MagicJank.com and reach a whole new audience. So we'd love to see you over there. And again, huge thank you to MagicJank.com for making this show possible. So here we are, everybody. We're going back to Ixalan. How are we feeling about this, gentlemen? Any just overall general thoughts before we just dive right on in? It feels weird to start and then like immediately just grab a preview card and go. Like,
yeah, I mean,
but at the same time,
delving into the lost caverns.
The cavern of souls.
Hey, I see what you did there. Yeah.
It could be, just regular old Ixalan, all dinos, all merfolk, all vampires, and whatever other warring factions there are on the plane. But we're delving into the cavern, right?
Indeed.
Or to the core of Ixalan. And we're discovering that there are plenty of other things we haven't seen before on the plane, like angels,
yes.
which we will, I'm sure, cover today.
Oh my goodness, yes. Yeah,
There's
there are
also
angels.
gods, right? There's like some big,
gods,
powerful beings. We finally get god cards back. It's been a while. The last time we saw them was Theros, right? The Return to Theros. We had a few god cards.
Theros Beyond Death, I believe, was the last time.
Yeah.
I just had a moment of like, wait, there was Amonkhet, and then I'm realizing I'm thinking of Amonkhet Remastered on Arena, which was all reprints.
Yeah.
So yes, I believe Theros Beyond Death was the last time we saw, gods printed into a standard legal set. So yeah, we got new ones. We've talked about some of them, because I know we had, I've recently found out it's pronounced, the J is actually pronounced like an H in O'Hare. So it's O'Hare Oxenil. I'm sure my accent is awful, completely. I'm still butchering it, I'm sure. But we were like, Ogier? What is it? So let's look at Ogier. It's actually O'Hare. Special thanks to the folks at WotC for their live streams doing the previews. I heard somebody pronounce it. Like, I'm making a note of that for later. Anyway, so we have a whole bunch of new gods. We definitely have a lot of thoughts on those. I love too when they were designing this set. I don't have any connections to WotC. This is something they've said publicly. They were clearly designing an underground world. They wanted groups of people to be diving underground, kind of a journey to the center of the earth kind of vibe is kind of the impression that I'm getting. And there was a big mystical artifact at the center that a bunch of different factions were, trying to get to. And somewhere in development, they realized, like, wait a minute, couldn't this just be inside Ixalan? And I just love that it came together that way. And it's just kind of like, put some dinosaurs in there and we're good to go, right? Yeah. And it works really well. I think it's a really neat take because we're seeing a world that we already know from a very different perspective. And it's all in all just generally neat. So you mentioned that we are going to be seeing God cards again. And there is one that I want to talk about because I know a lot of folks. I mean, let's just get started with a couple of those. So we've seen O'Hare Oxenil, the red one, the Dino Hand dude. We've seen that one already. And then we've seen two other ones at this point. We've seen the blue one and we've also seen the white one as of this recording. I want to start with the white one because I have feelings on this card and I want to know to get your takes on it as well. So O'Hare Tak, Deepest Foundation, is a legendary creature god, 4 white for a 6/6 with vigilance. If one or more creature tokens would be created under your control 3 times that many of those tokens are created instead, when it dies, it returns to the battlefield tapped and transformed, and it comes in as the Temple of Civilization, which can tap for a white, and you can pay 2 and a white, tap, transform it, but activate only if you attacked with 3 or more creatures this turn, and only as a sorcery. So that's the way that it can kind of recur itself.
Mm-hmm.
Assuming that you're actually playing in a format where death triggers matter, which, unlike current standard, but anyway. So okay, do you guys have any feelings on this card? Because I do, but I'm going to give the floor to you guys first.
I think that it's a really powerful card up front. Obviously, tripling effects, and then if you put this with a doubler and so on and so forth. What I actually really, really like about the card, besides it being obviously powerful for that effect, is that it's really easy to flip back over. I think it's actually the easiest one of all of them technically, because most of the time if you're playing this in a token deck, you're playing this in a deck where there's going to be lots of creatures. So either way, this card's almost always going to be able to flip back into the god form. Overall, like, if we're talking about constructed, yeah, there's a chance this card gets played because it's obscenely powerful. The difference being is that Mondrak already exists in the format, and we don't see it get played at all. So I would imagine that this card is, more expensive than Mondrak, so it's not going to get played.
Mm-hmm.
For Commander, this card is obviously degenerate. A lot of the time, it probably is going to stick on the table, and then by the time it's your turn again, everyone's hoping that you just don't do anything at all and just pass, and then you're going to cast just one spell to make tokens, and then you got like 12 8/8 dinosaurs or something, and then everyone's like, oh, I'm dead. Like, either you can play this card like in a multicolored deck, 2-color Celestia deck, like this card. And Commander, this card's just disgusting. For other constructive formats, like let's say Standard, Modern, Pioneer, all these other formats, I think 6 mana doesn't say I win the game. So
interestingly enough, from the person who's been playing some token stuff in Standard and Explorer, like jank wise anyway, we didn't have rotation, so Rabble Rousing still exists in this format, right? And Rabble Rousing pairs really well with Mondrak. We also have Galta and Raven and Gruff triplets, which make insane amount of tokens by themselves, right? So imagine playing this creature and then Gruff triplets, and you getting 3 times 2, 6 Gruff triplet tokens onto the battlefield. Seems pretty nice to me. Also, this card costing 6 mana matters late game, right? Because like usually your opponent's wasting a lot of removal on your early plays, and then this presents them with another threat that they might not be able to remove from the board immediately. So, and the 6/6 vigilance is very strong. It blocks everything, pretty much, except Atraxa. Nothing blocks that card. So, the other plus side, I think I said this last time on the cast when we talked about the Red God. The flip side of these cards aren't legendary. So they can kill one, and then you play another one, and you can just keep swapping, having them on the battlefield, which I think is really nice. So at least if they kill it, you get that land afterwards with the possibility to flip it back. And considering most token cards or most token effects that you're putting on the battlefield are making a bunch of tokens at once, and it's not just like one per turn, this card, like Hollywood just said, is very easily flippable.
Yeah. No, okay. These are all great points. I was ready to completely and totally dunk on this card. I was ready to say it was terrible, and then you just said the magic word in Gruff Triplets. And like, okay. Now all of a sudden, I'm envisioning Thunderous Debut and finding this.
Yes, I was thinking the same thing. Like, was you play Thunderous Debut or you play Awake in the Woods?
Yep.
So you play Awake in the Woods and you triple your mana pretty much, and then if you have any way of giving your creatures haste off of like a Brothers Reunion or whatever it's called, right? The one that you discard a card.
Bitter Reunion,
Bitter Reunion. So you play that, and then you're like, oh, I guess all my cards have haste. Now I have like 20 mana. I tap that 20 mana, and I probably play something that wins the game.
Yeah, probably.
Probably, right? Like,
no, yeah. And so as far as constructed goes, I believe there might be ways to do this. As long as Sunfall is around, going wide is a risky proposition, right? It just is. There's just no way around it. I mean, it's funny that you mentioned that.
Counterspell.
It's funny you mentioned that
because
the
with the Tameo deck, right? When Blind Mice or whatever.
3 Blind Mice, yeah. The only aggro decks that I see actually like winning have blue and have like 8 counterspells main deck. Like that's like the only way to do it.
Azorius Soldiers is the best. Is one of the best decks because it's literally like, oh, they're gonna play the board wipe, 2 mana, my turn.
Yeah, protect the negotiators, make disappear.
Yep.
Yeah, piss off. It's my turn now. Like I'm gonna swing for lethal. Yeah. So I don't know. It's one of those things where going wide right now, and I think Mondrak is like the best, comparison here because we have a 4 mana token doubler live right now in the format. And there is not a single competitive deck that even considers running it.
Maybe
there's some janky
both.
brews where it's fun, but even then, a setup piece that is your curve to hopper is not where you want to be generally. And this costing 6, the difference between doubling and tripling is pretty minimal when you really stop and think about it outside of Commander. So I think this is one of those cards. It is going to be $80 when it for the next 6 months just because of Commander. And I honestly think we're going to get to a point right now. There are going to be Selesnya decks out there, and if you have one of these decks, you know who you are. I'm looking at you. I see you. I'm calling you out.
I was thinking about building Selesnya.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that Selesnya's bad. I'm just saying, let me finish. There are Selesnya token decks out there that have more doublers than token generators at this point because there are just so many options. And so now we have a tripler. Sure, it's big, it's splashy, it is eye-catching. And I think there are going to be Commander games where the token math gets absolutely stupid and things are ridiculous. And so great, that's what Commander's for, go nuts. But in any competitive serious 60 card 1v1 format, this is way too expensive. I can't imagine it seeing
I think
any
it could get played
meaningful
with
play.
Mondrak. So my idea is you play 2 or 3 Mondraks, you play one of these. So then you have a couple kind of different types of threats, right? You play your Mondrak first. If they kill it, obviously you play your other Mondrak, or you play this, and then they're like, oh, now it's a 6/6, and it's probably going to be a little bit harder to kill. I think there's a chance it could get played because of how powerful it is. I think that the 6 mana is the actual part that holds it back.
That's
and
fair.
I think there's a card from Wilds of Eldraine that copies enchantments. It makes a token of the enchantment. And I can't imagine a scenario now where you have this in Doubling Season. You copy your Doubling Season, so you make 3 more Doubling Seasons, and then you find a way to untap that other card, and then you start copying.
But don't you kind of win with 1 doubling season on the battlefield?
It's the same.
Carlo.
It's the same thing when people this is sounding like, hey, you know what goes great with Scoot Swarm? Dreadfeast demons.
Look,
and it's sure, but you already just win with the Scoot Swarm. Why are you adding more?
I'm gonna call you for this one, Carlo. I'm pretty sure you've had 2 Chain Veils in play. Don't you just win when you have 1 Chain?
I mean, okay, that's pretty fun.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Yeah, and in Commander, go crazy. Get silly, get ridiculous, and this is 100% a Commander card in my opinion. And
oh yeah, dude. Yeah,
if you want big dumb Commander stuff, yeah, have fun. Is a great toy for that environment. And that's the only
$40 card too. On top of that, right? That's where Mondrak sat for a long time. Now Mondrak's still $20-$25. So I expect this card to probably be around the 30 to 40 range for a while, and then probably slow down to $15-$20, and then you can pick them up, and then obviously in 3 months or so it'll probably be another card that'll be expensive when they print another card that makes tokens, and then every token card goes up, and so on and so forth. So if you want to get this card, buy into it when it hits low enough. Just get it. If you want to get multiples, get it, and then after that, it's a card that's going to be a Commander staple at the end of the day. This goes in every single Selesnya deck, pretty much. Every Selesnya deck's already built it. So you play every doubler, you play Mondrak, you play this, you play Doubling Season, you play all those, and then you find any generic cards that make a whatever called the Conclave or whatever it's called. You make all the 3/3s, or you play the one that makes the worm, and then you make 20 worms, or you play Garrick, and then Garrick's ultimate makes worm. So I think that there's already cards obviously in Commander is becoming apparent where almost every deck kind of starts the same, and I think that this is going to be another one of those cards that get added into the token strategy if you are obviously playing white, which most of them are.
Yeah, it is quite common.
This and Wedding Announcement's also very good. So
true. Yeah, Wedding Announcement, rabble rousing. There's some cool synergy. It's there, but
6 mana.
It's 6 mana. It's 6 mana.
Doesn't win the game.
This is what it is. That said, we have another one of the gods that I think is a little more interesting and a little more viable in some of the other formats, just because of its mana cost, and that is Oher Paktapik, Deepest Epoch. And I'm sorry for all the pronunciations throughout the course of this entire podcast. I'm sorry. It is what it is. This is a 4/3 flying god for 2 blue. So 4/3 flyer for 4, right? Like stat line wise and everything. Now we're talking. Whenever you cast an instant spell from your hand, it gains rebound. And if you're not familiar with that, when you cast a spell with rebound, you exile it as it resolves, and at the beginning of your next upkeep, you may cast it from exile without paying its mana cost. And then when O'Hare Paktapik, I'm sure I'm going to pronounce it 7 more different ways. Hopefully one of them's right. Return to the battlefield tab transformed under someone's control with 3 time counters on it. And the Temple of Cyclical Time, which I'm going to slip and say Cynical Time a lot, I'm sure. It is a land that can tap 4 blue, and when you tap it for blue, you remove a time counter from it. Then you can pay 2 and a blue, tap, transform it, activate only if it has no time counters on it, and only as a sorcery. I mean, this is a lot cleaner, right? Or this is a lot more likely to see play, right?
Yeah, 100%. My biggest complaint is not a 4/4, but I guess that's probably going to be a good thing, probably for people that have like Strangle and red decks and stuff.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I think this card's really powerful. I think outside of standard, I'm kind of a little bit questionable. If it'll get played, I really like it in the Phoenix deck. Because the Phoenix deck just plays so many instants and just so many spells.
Sure.
But that deck also plays sorceries, so that might not be the best for that deck. So maybe this card could make a new deck. It's a really good card. I think it's just missing a couple things, which is either like more power, toughness, or it's missing flash because like in the deck that you want to play this in, you're playing instants, so it's like tapping out for this card is rough. So like you're playing this card on what, turn 6, turn 8, when you have like counter spell backup, and I think Chrome Host Shark is just better than that, maybe.
Yeah, probably.
I think this card's good. It's obviously a little bit pushed. I would have liked for it to get pushed more. I like that it's instant, so in Commander, this card's really good. You can build your whole deck around that. And then on top of that, it has time counters, so obviously with the new Doctor Who cards, there's tons of different things that you can do with the land by removing all the time counters and flipping it back over again very, very quickly. So I think that this card in Commander is going to be like an all-star in the decks that really, really want it. In Standard, I could see this card getting played because, once again, it's a mythic. It's got powerful abilities, but this is one of those few cards that even if it lives, you're maybe not doing something crazy powerful. Whereas, like, I'll even say, I hate comparing cards to Shieldred. I'm not saying this is a dark comparison, but even like a Shieldred, like when it untaps, like you feel a lot better because you feel like your opponent's probably going to draw a lot more cards, where with O'Hare, you're at the mercy of what's in your hand. So unless you like really sculpted your hand early and played like a lot of flash draw spells maybe, or had some kind of scry effects, like you're at the mercy of what's in your hand. And you also can't, one thing that I think we're actually going to see get played with this card is, if this card does start to get played, we're not going to see Deluge anymore. We're going to start to see the card from Eldraine, because the card from Eldraine actually lets you cast it and not have any downside, where if you cast Memory Deluge from Rebound, you're casting it without any mana, so it's just going to fizzle.
And on top of that, with Rebound, it goes into exile, so it doesn't go to your graveyard. And that's, I think, one of the big reasons why this is not going to fit the current mono blue deck at all, is because it doesn't help you cast your Tolarian Terrors cheaper, because you have to cast everything out of exile in order to get it into your graveyard, so there's a delay on the graveyard being boosted. Your Hardigan's power is going to stay static for a turn. Like, because when you cast a spell, it goes into exile regardless. And then if you don't cast it the following turn, it stays in exile. So it's just gone. So any counter spells that you rip with this are just gone forever. They get exiled. So cards that care about your graveyard don't do anything. Don't get buffed. So this would have to be its own deck. To your point, though, Hollywood, I think Quick Study becomes very good with this. Because all of a sudden, like if you can rip a Quick Study with this card on the battlefield, drawing 2 cards right away and then untapping, presumably like immediately, and then drawing 2 additional cards, like that's pretty nuts, right?
Yeah, I mean, I could see this being played in like the Dimir deck that primarily was playing cards like Cut Down and Go for the Throw and Shieldred's Edict and Siphon Insight. And stuff like this. Like, this seems to fit perfect in there. I just don't know that it's better than Shieldred at the same mana cost, right?
Right.
Is going to be one of the main issues. Like maybe you could play like a copy or two of this in the deck, and hey, you know, if your opponent ends up having to kill this card and you flip it into the land, you could play 6 mana, I don't know, Invasion of whatever it's called, 6 mana Fiora that like wraps the board or something, so it ramps you. Not saying that card's very good, but just saying it's an option.
I like this with like big score. I think this and like big score is like nuts, right?
There you
like
go.
You just draw a bunch of cards, make a bunch of mana.
Mm-hmm.
But then at that point, it's like I just feel like this it's cards on the wrong side of the curve. Your 4-drops are always like these super like almost bomb game turning or like game ending cards. Like if your opponent doesn't answer the 4-drop, you're probably gonna win. This card though is like, in all honesty, it almost feels like too gimmicky. Like it's I think if it said instants or sorceries, I think this card would be nuts. I think it would be a lot better.
That's a whole other level.
Yeah, I think it would be a lot better. But I think because it's only still even, like I said, at flash speed, like the decks that want to play the flash cards usually play like cheap threats. Like Haughty only costs 3, but it also reduces your cards. Delver only costs 1. Yeah, and Tolarian Terror probably costs 1 mana. This card almost always costs 4. It's, I don't know. I wish it was a little bit more pushed. Either like a 3 mana 4/4 that had this ability. Obviously, blue doesn't get creatures that good, but whatever. 2023, just do it.
You know what this is reminding me of? This is reminding me of God Eternal Kefnet. Do you guys remember that card at all from War of the Spark?
Yeah, definitely.
4/5 flyer for 4, if I'm recalling correctly.
Yep.
And you could free cast the first card you drew if it was an instant or sorcery.
Yeah, you had the miracle effect.
Yeah, and so like that card was honestly kind of cracked, and it did something similar. It was a flying 4-drop threat that in that case actually was very good on defense as well, unlike this one. And like that's on 0 play in standard, and the standard at that point was a much lower powered standard than we're at today. So I don't know about much, but it was lower than it is now. So I don't know. No, I'm glad to agree. I think the card is cool. I'm definitely going to try to force some stuff around it. The idea of, double dipping on all your kill spells and your draw spells, like, that's pretty neat. Like, if being able to double dip on impulses and quick studies and your go for the throats and cut downs, like, it's a cool idea. I like the thought. But yeah, I mean, there's unfortunately we're at a point where there's better sources of card advantage.
Creatures have to be way better now.
They just do.
See play, unfortunately.
It's wild.
So,
absolutely wild. All right. Well, so like there are a lot of actual creatures in this set that they've spoiled so far, that are quite speaking of just how good creatures need to be. I like that. As kind of the jumping off point here. There's a card here for those of you out there who, if there's a little bit of a casual debate, right? Which are better, dinosaurs or dragons? Like dinosaurs, you have the real thing. Like those actually existed. That's neat, right? Dragons but they're dragons. Like who can be mad at dragons? Well, Ixalan decided why not both, and they gave us the Bone Horde Dracosar, which is literally a dinosaur dragon. Because like, just why not? It is just all of the things all wrapped up into one. And this thing is a 5/5 flying first strike for 3 red. So we already have 5/5 flyer first strike 4/5, but wait, there's more. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. If you exiled a land card this way, create a 3/1 red dinosaur creature token. If you exiled a non-land card this way, create a treasure token.
Ham. Carlo. I seriously think this card is like gonna get played. This card is just so strong. Like you untap and you're like, I draw 2 extra cards, or I get 2 extra cards that I have the choice of playing. Oh wait, but there's more. I make mana and another threat. Oh, and my card has first strike and flying. And it's like
yeah, and additionally, if you draw your land, you get a creature. Because you're going to play the land anyway. But if you draw a non-land, you get a treasure that can help you cast the non-land you just drew. What?
Talk about pushed. You want to talk about push?
You get both of the effects from this card regardless, right?
Regardless. You get 2 things regardless. Yeah. Yeah,
so
you impulsive draw 2 extra cards on your turn.
Or a 3/1 and a treasure, or 2 treasures, which means you're going from 5 to 7 mana for your Atali. I mean, hey.
Plus your land drop, you can hit 8 mana, hit the Thunderous debut, and then sack another token you have out or something. I don't know.
Right.
Oh. I mean, yeah, Stomper on 3 into this on 4, and it's like, yeah, it puts your opponent into an immediate position of, do you have a kill spell? If yes, target this. If not, get wrecked. Like that is just.
Yeah, this card late game is like it's just another Atraxa type card where it's like late game you play it, they don't kill it, you untap, you're like, all right, I start making threats. I essentially draw, like I said, you kind of just draw 2 extra cards. Like most of the time, exiling cards and playing them in the same turn is just drawing cards at this point. Obviously, this card's great with Pia.
Yeah, exactly. You had Pia or like or Rocco into the mix. Good lord. Like,
yeah, there's already strategies that are good with this card. Like the only downside is that it costs 5 mana. That's literally the only downside to this card. Is that I don't even think it's really competing with much in the 5-dot slot. I really don't. I guess the real question is there going to be a new deck that plays this card, or like is this like the ultimate like mono red like curve out card where you go 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop, 4 drop, and then you play this, and if they kill most of your other cards, well, now you have a 5/5 flying first strike, and you can burn their creature to kill it with the first strike during blocks if need be, and every turn you're drawing 2 extra cards, and essentially your lands are never dead that you're hitting off that card, right? Like you said, like if I hit 2 lands, I get 2 3/1s. If I have ways to give them haste or ways to abuse those, or hell, they're just 3/1s. Like they can attack. Like and you get treasures. We all know even if the treasure's not adding you mana, you can bargain it. You can use a treasure for the craft ability that we haven't even gotten to yet. But there's so many. Man, when I first read this card, I had to read it like 3 times because I was like, literally the only drawback is the mana cost. Like this card's straight busted. I think this card's like. Everyone's going to compare it to probably something, but this card's incomparable. I think it's just like its own card, and I think we're finally getting to see Red get good card draw. And good value. Red's been missing like the main problem with Red most of the time is that when it's not the aggro deck, it's just a splash color, right? Like you're mostly just splashing it here and there for, like you said, a card like Atali. Maybe we play another multicolor card in like the 5-color deck, like whatever, right? Whatever Atraxa's not red, but whatever card's red, like you're gonna splash for it. But Bone Horde actually makes you want to play red. Like now I want to be in red. Like I could play this, and if I hit 2 treasures, you're right. I'm just playing an Atali, and the game's like almost over, right? Like your opponent's gonna have a hard time coming back with you drawing 2 cards, and you just flip 2 free cards, like.
Yeah, so, just quick thought, right? Not saying this is something that's going to happen, but I kind of foresee it. And I was talking about it at our LGS today at the comic book store. I think Red is like moving in a direction where you can play a fast version of Red and you can play the Big Red version. And in terms of Big Red, just to put it into context, we've got Charming Scoundrel from Eldraine, which ramps you a treasure, right? Among other things. You have the Iron Crag, which is a colorless ramp. So if you go turn 2 Charming Scoundrel, you can play turn 3 Koth, which then guarantees you that mana to be able to play this card the next turn.
You could also Chandra ramps too.
You have you do have that Chandra that you could use. But yeah, all of that is very possible with this card, and you just play 4x of this card because it's not legendary and sort of no reason not to. And it allows you to play cards like Jaya, like in your sideboard and stuff like this. Just go wide instead of what's expected. Now, whether or not a type of deck like that is good versus a format Titan like Esper, I can't make that answer, right? Because obviously playing mono red, you lose like enchantment removal and stuff like that, which is traditionally why the faster red decks do better, beat them before they got it, sort of thing. But I would be interested to see a mono red shell for sure.
Yeah, red has board wipes. I think this card could get played with one of you and I's favorite cards, which was that Tyrant or that Hellkite, whatever it was from Eldraine, where you bargain and you add mana. Well, this card automatically gives you the mana and it gives you options to bargain. Well, so I agree with you 100%. I think Big Red is a archetype that is essentially just seen as like kind of like a tier X, right? It's just like whatever. It's just someone just really likes to play these big red cards. Well, in reality, no one's actually really tried it, and I do agree with you. I think that there's a realm of possibility where you play cards like Brotherhood's End, where maybe you against Esper they curve out, and you're like, well, I just wipe your board, or you play Burn Down the House.
Burn Down the House is still
wipe your board. I think that all these cards are good, and then you can still ramp out and have enough mana to do stuff. And then, there's tons of artifacts now that allow you to give you kinds of like different play. And red has a lot of good removal. It's got that Witchstalker Frenzy that can kill Shieldreds.
Yep.
The Salvo I was playing the other night, I sent Ham the deck list of like this equipment deck I've been playing. Red has a lot of good removal on Nahiri's Warcraft, and like there's just a lot of really good big red cards, and I think that they're high end value cards that can either be good in Gruul. Like I've been trying out that Gruul deck with Atali and Titan of Industry, and just those two cards by themselves are just enough to win the game almost every time you play them. Or you Thunderstep, you hit both of them. Fight Rigging, hit both of them. Like, and I think Bonehorde, Dragosaur really, I think this card fills the gap because there's a lot of times where you're ramping and you kind of just need to play one big dumb thing, but you're not at like 7 mana yet. And I think that this is going to be that. This and Vorinclex could potentially be those two big dumb things at 5 mana that you play that guarantee you that 7 mana card, because Vorinclex goes and gets lands and this card makes treasures. So I think that this card is the quintessential quote unquote mid-range card to hit your late game spells.
Yeah. No, I think you're dead on, because red right now seems to have a lot of like 1 and 2 drops that are clearly designed to just end the game quickly. And Charming Scoundrel is kind of a fun case because it can do both. It's like in the super fast version, you put it in there for the Wicked roll. In a longer, bigger red version, you put it in there for the treasure token. Either way, you're happy, the card rolls. But you also have cards like Godric, though, which is like, so when you get into like your Godrics or even your, it's kind of fallen out of favor now, but like the Thundering Raijus, like those are definitely designed to just end the game, like they're just very aggressive. They don't provide recurring value to speak of at all. And so, yeah, Hollywood, I think you're exactly right. I feel like Bonehorde Dragusar here slots in as like that mid-size, because obviously if any deck can ramp up to 7 mana right now, there are options and stuff's going to get stupid. But like getting there is the tricky part. Getting there in a way that forces your opponent to spend their removal is tough. Because like, yeah, if you drop a Charming Scoundrel and make out a treasure token, they're not going to spend a go for the throat on a 1/1 Charming Scoundrel. Like, they did their job already. I'm not going to kill that.
What's really interesting, too, is Godric works really well in the same deck because its Celebration trigger will always trigger off of this card if it's on the battlefield.
Yep.
And then it becomes a dinosaur, and Godric pumps the team, right?
That's right.
Or it becomes not a dinosaur.
It has a fire-breathing
fire-breathing
dragon, but yeah, it's really strong.
Yeah.
It fills the curve.
And so
it
works... Yeah, extremely well in that slot.
What card's really good too is the card you guys talked about last week, O'Hare, because you can still play Kumanos with O'Hare, and if you play like O'Hare and then you just drop like 1 Kumanos, they take like 4 damage, or there's tons of like just incidental damage, right? You play like all these weird incidental damage cards, and maybe you can even play. So I was already coming up with the deck while you guys were talking about it. It was like a gleeful demolition deck that you can convoke City on Fire and then use O'Hare to just kill them. And then your backup's like the dragon and Atali. And then you just play like ramp spells. So then like you just have this one path that's fair. And then you have this other path that's like kind of busted and a lot more unfair. So if your opponent deals with like one of them. But I really think that this big red deck could be a possibility.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested
or like a more mid-rangey deck. It might even play some of the good aggressive cards like Voldaren, the Bloodthirsty Voldaren is like a really strong card, right? Like that vampire is good on 2. But it's also good at 5 mana where you can, get your Nahiri's Warcrafting back or your Lightning Strike back. Like, so I think that you're right. Like, you can play the aggressive cards like the Kumanos, the Voldaren, the Godric, curve out into the O'Hare, play your Bonehorde or, another 4-drop. Like, there's at Sushi, Red has so many good cards right now. It's kind of insane, right? Like, there's so many different ways to build that deck. I mean, hell, there might even be a dragon deck. Like the Invasion of Tarkir is a card that we all know is a powerful effect, but there haven't been enough good dragons printed. Well, here's an actually like straight busto dragon that if you untap with it, like does pretty much almost guarantee you like a game win.
Yep.
By like progressing card advantage.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that it doesn't have haste. That would obviously like really help. But also, I think it's really telling. This card really illustrates how weak the timing is on triggers that occur on your upkeep. It is shocking Like nowadays we're seeing more enter the battlefield or attacks or simply attack triggers, or we're seeing more of these modes or trigger on the end step. That's one that we've seen a lot more these days than we did in the past. Where I feel like there was a time when everything triggered on your upkeep, and it was just expected that you had to stick it and it had to survive run around the table in order for there to be some kind of advantage. And now we look at that, and it has to be something like this, which is just, if this triggers, it is off the charts insane because you had to wait that cycle. And I've heard a lot of people actually saying that this card isn't even that good just because of that. And, you know, in Standard, it's going to be in a very hostile environment. Like, this thing is going to get nuked most of the time. Mm-hmm. But honestly,
I mean, if they waste their go for the throats on your bad creatures, it's going to survive.
Yeah, exactly. If you've got 3 drops or 2 drops that are going to pull some of those early, then this is going to survive some amount of the time, and when it does, it's going to be insane. But even then, if they spend a go for the throat on this, that's a go for the throat that's not about to hit your Atsushi or your your Atali that's coming next. Mm-hmm. So, all right, cool. And your Atali might spin into another one of these, which, like, yeah. Anyway, the possibilities.
Let's go.
It's not legendary. This card's not legendary.
Let's go. It's not legendary.
Yeah, exactly. Nuts in Commander. I don't even think we have to say that it's good in Commander. Like,
Commander is insane.
Like there's so many effects that play with Exile that this card's just so broken.
Yeah, right. It reminds me a lot of Elder Gargaroth. Because I remember when Elder Gargaroth came out, that was a 6/6 Vigilant Reach Trample for 5. With an attack trigger.
Say more, Ham.
It was great.
Music to my ears.
I know, right? No, Elder Gargaroth was fantastic, but I remember during previews, people saying that card's it's just gonna die before it triggers. This isn't really all that good. I mean, it's big, I guess. And that card's like $30 now because it's in the 5-drop slot. If you need just the big dumb thing in the 5-drop slot in green, that's about as good as it gets. This is 100% gonna be that in red.
Yeah, this card's just, I mean, I don't get how you could think this card is bad. No, this card probably won't get played in Modern.
There's probably not. No.
Yeah, there's too many free cards.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
But I mean, I don't know. I mean, you hit. I guess evokes. No, you can. Can you evoke Fury from Exile? Right? Yeah, maybe you can. I don't know if you can, but I don't know. Either way, I think that this card is definitely going to get played. And you're right. Look, I really think that the it dies to removal argument. Here, let me turn my mic back up because for some reason it keeps going down. But I think that the it dies to removal argument died with Shieldred. Because Shieldred is the one card where if it dies to removal, like, yeah, you just spent 4 mana on like this card that did nothing. Well, that's the same thing for the dragon. Who cares? Like, you're going to play your bomb. If your opponent has the answer, I mean, they have the answer. You can't like not play magic cards because they die to a card. That's like insane.
Yeah.
Like, you got to play the best cards that you can all the time, and that's it.
Yeah, I feel like the question whenever you hear that argument or whenever somebody levies that argument, look at the card and ask yourself, does this force my opponent to remove it? And in this case, the answer is unquestionably yes. And it's like, yeah, they will sometimes have that removal, but sometimes they won't. And that's just how it works, you know? In any event.
Everyone makes their removal like pretty quickly, so
yeah, and you need to give. I mean, if you're trying to play aggressively, if you're trying to win with creatures, you need to play. You need to play out the creatures, right? So, speaking of creatures that are pretty meaningful and pretty fantastic, I'm looking at a whole group of them actually on my screen that I want to talk about, but I want to get to one that I have many feelings on. And I'm assuming you two gentlemen do as well. And I'm going to use the showcase art because it looks really pretty. Pugnacious Hammerskull.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
This card is great.
I know, right? It's a dinosaur for 2 and a green. So just leading off with that. Dinosaur for 3. What could the stats on this possibly be? Well, if you guessed 6/6, you are correct. And I'm sure you're thinking, oh, there must be some tremendous downside then if it's a 6/6 for 3. Clearly. We've seen...
Yeah.
Well, whenever Pugnacious Hammerskull attacks while you don't control another dinosaur, put a stun counter on it.
Fine. Yeah. That's interesting because, and I don't want to say that this involves, like, it might involve showing some other preview cards to make this card relevant. But there are dinosaurs that cost less than 3, or the possibility that, hey, just because it costs 3 doesn't mean you got to play it on turn 3 type thing. first thing that's coming to my mind is actually an uncommon that they had spoiled. The card costs 2 mana. It's called Belligerent Yearling. And that is an uncommon 1 and a red for a 3/2 with trample. And this card in particular says whenever another dinosaur enters the battlefield under your control, you may have its base power become equal to that creature's power until end of turn. So if you play this as your 3/2, right? 3/2 trample for 2 mana, great. Sign me
Excellent.
up.
Yep.
Then you slam this 6/6 that we're talking about, our Hammer Skull. That means that card becomes 6 power and certainly can attack as a 6/2 trample, which is great. And now you got yourself 2 dinosaurs on the battlefield. And
Fantastic.
that's also missing the fact that we can play dinosaurs on turn 4.
Yep.
Whether that is playing, let's say we have like some mana ramp going or something, and we want to play that last card we just talked about.
Yep.
Right? That dinosaur dragon on the next turn. Or, hey, let's say that we want to play something like Topiary Stomper as a follow-up, which ramps us and then lets us attack with this 6/6 and not get the stun counter on it. And we're ramping our way up to playing Big Daddy Itali or Tyrannix Rex. Hello, sign me up. That is what this card is all about. And that's not even touching on the fact that you can follow up this card with fight rigging from...
I was going to say, if you didn't mention that card, there was going to be a problem.
Oh, it was coming up. Don't worry.
and bam, 7/7 right off the bat. Casting a free spell, which can cast you that 7 mana dinosaur off the fight rigging, and cause some carnage. So,
yep. And if you hit the Itali, if you hide away Itali under fight rigging and get the free cast it off of this, you now have a dinosaur. So go crazy. Like, and the other thing that's just nuts to me, like all of these scenarios that we're describing are not like they sound like really outlandish magical Christmas land situations. But in current standard, we've all done things like this, right? Like it's not hard
super easily,
to do some of this nonsense,
right?
And also thank you for bringing up the Belligerent Yearling, because that is just such a phenomenal curve, just 2 into 3, like that's insane. But I just want to talk to you for a sec about how like the stun counter is not that big a deal. Like it's a little annoying, especially if your opponent can say proliferate. Like, I was in a game of Commander the other night where actually I got a couple of proliferate spells after I had put stun counters on some of my opponent's stuff. I was like, oh, I'm the bad guy. This is rude.
Yeah.
So, you open yourself up to that. We do have proliferate in standard right now, so okay. But the thing is, that stun counter comes off anytime you would untap this. So even if you're in a deck with, say, Virtue of Loyalty, for example, it untaps your creatures. Well, it wouldn't untap the Hammer Skull, but it would take the stun counter off. So then on your upkeep, it would untap normally. That's assuming it's your only dinosaur. So honestly, the downside is just minimal. Like, it can block regardless. Like, you can just put down a 6/6 blocker. Like, Mono Red is going to hate seeing this thing.
Oh,
it's just,
man,
it's an absolute stop sign, and their Witchstalker Frenzy doesn't kill it.
It's really good with fling effects, too. Like,
oh my goodness, yes.
Aldarin,
like,
and the new card that was from Eldraine.
Like, all of a sudden, the fling effects, you got your Valdaran Thrill Seekers, you've got... there's Ziatora still in the format, fun fact. Like, the opportunity for just, like...
Yeah.
The amount of silly nonsense that gets opened up the moment you have this much just stat material for 3 mana gets ridiculous. And the only downside occurs if you're attacking and if you don't control another dinosaur. And the thing is, too, if you're in an aggro deck, like, that means that this can attack every other turn if you don't have another dinosaur. That's it. I mean, if you compare this, the comparison that I can't help but see is Lovestruck Beast, which was a format-defining staple in Green. When it had its reign in Standard. But that was at a time, I mean, obviously it came in Throne of Eldraine, which is like historically one of the most busted times we've had in Standard in a long time. Whole bunch of stuff got banned. That card never quite made the cut. And like it and Bone Crusher Giant were just the things. Everybody ran these, they just were what they were, right? And that was a 5/5 for 3 that could block whatever, but couldn't attack unless you had a 1/1. So if you're running any anthems whatsoever, there were some games where it just couldn't attack, period. You know, and there were plenty of situations where it was funny actually, because the Great Henge, like the only downside to the Great Henge was that it made your 1/1s come in with a +1/+1 counter on them, so it prevented Lovestruck Beast from attacking. But even so, the card was phenomenal. Just having 5/5 for 3, even if it can't attack, it's still great. Well, this is a 6/6 for 3. And even if you don't meet the conditions, it can still attack sometimes. You know, like it can still attack at least once, and it can theoretically swing every other turn if you don't have any way to interact with the counter. I mean,
and you know, if we're putting this into like a really fast-paced deck, you know, or low to the ground, just like a Gruul aggro deck that's playing a couple dinosaurs and a couple non-dinosaurs. You know, nothing stops you from throwing like Monstrous Rage onto this creature and having a 9-power trampler on turn 4, which is crazy, right? And that sort of speaks to like another point, right? Like we've seen plenty of aggro decks in Standard. There's only a few that really stand out, and it's hard to defeat sort of like this Esper Menace or like the Sunfall decks.
Mid-range dot deck.
Yeah, right. Like it's just not possible. But I'm glad to see them printing cards that would slot very well into aggro decks. You know, green has not really been popular for quite some time, at least in Standard. Hasn't really been able to make an impact, and everything green has done has been adding to a ramp strategy. You know, we're thankful that the Golgari mid-range deck that exists right now in Standard is very playable, but it's because the majority of the power players are black cards, right? So like this makes me a little giddy and happy to see just a solid 6/6 for 3 mana.
We need green cards. There haven't been any good green cards for a while. Overall, like green's definitely taken a hit here. Well, I mean, in general, over the last like year and a half, I would say, like green peaked at like snow green, obviously back like, you know, Kaldheim days, and
Blizzard Brawl, Werefox, Pack Leader, all that jazz. Or
the thing about green and red and some of these mid-range or aggressive strategies, that once mid-range comes into the fold, they kind of just like leave. They can't really like exist because the other creatures are value creatures. They have multiple effects, and the removal's so cheap, right? Like think about it. We're at the point where a 3-mana 6/6 pretty much has no drawback, and this card could still not even see any play. This could just be another 3-mana 6/6 that's a fight rigging target that isn't like a competitive card.
Yeah. Right? This could be Shakedown Heavy or Devouring Sugar Maw or
the Desecrator
Arcfiend of the Dross. Like it could just be that all over again. Which is possible. That said, I've seen more and more Arcfiend as of late. Like I maybe I'm just getting paired up against Janksters who are experimenting with stuff, which I appreciate. Thank you, Matchmaker. But it is a card that I've been seeing more and more of, which gives me hope. You know, because like, granted, that's a 6-power flyer, so that's a very different situation. But still, you know, I have hope, and I think this particular card, this is so pushed for what it is. It'll be very telling whether or not this sees play. I believe that this is pushed enough so that it will see some play and it will be good. And I will be adding it to all my fight rigging decks post haste for sure, because obviously
this card I think is. This is a great example of a card that's better on curve.
Right.
Like this card's way better on curve. If you're coming in, just like Carlos said, you play the 2-drop, you play the 3-drop, and then after that, it's like gravy.
Yeah. No, the opportunity is definitely there. Yeah. And I also love Belligerent Yearling is also just delightful.
That's great.
This card's awesome, and it's definitely telegraphing that some kind of aggressive dinosaur themed strategy is going to be important. And all of a sudden, Caverns of Souls becomes pretty good. We also have the Voracious Raptor from Mom. That is a really solid 4-drop. That is incidentally a dinosaur that I have a feeling might see more play now. Now that we have some more support.
It pumps itself. It helps come after battles, and it does all
the things. It does all the things. So the next card that I want to talk about is... I know we have a ton of stuff to discuss today, so we don't need to go too far into it, because let's be honest, this is probably more a draft card than anything. But it's adorable. It is making the meme circuit right now, so I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Poison Dart Frog.
What are you talking about? This card is busted.
It is actually genuinely quite strong as far as mana dorks go these days. It is a 1/1 frog for 1 and a green with reach, and it taps to have 1 mana of any color, and you can pay 2. Poison Dart Frog gains Death Touch till end of turn. So this could snipe an attacking Atraxa, and that makes me very happy. That's a trade I'm more than happy to make. Just saying. The other cool thing is that it gaining Death Touch. That's 2 generic mana, so you can declare it as a blocker and then tap it and something else to give itself Death Touch. So that's delightful. So it's funny, like the artwork is just this adorable little frog. That is, it's funny. At first, you see just like the big glowing eyes, and you're just like, oh, so cute. And then you look closer and you realize, oh, this frog is inside the lower jaw of a skull. And on top of that, the rest of the skull is in the background of the artwork as well. So like, yeah, this frog is adorable, but not safe.
Got some Golgari feels there.
Little bit. Yeah.
It's so funny how far we've come in Magic. I was actually looking at Utopia Tree the other day, and I just remember being like, man, Utopia Tree was like a rare. And back in the day, it was like one of those mana dorks that was like pretty good because it added any color. And this card is a common, pretty much. And it also adds a mana of any color and has reach and it has an ability. And it's like, and this card is just not. It's really cute, and I'm gonna try to have a deck in it so I can use it as a thumbnail. But other than that, it's just a pretty standard. Oh, it's so cute though. I don't want to just call it a pretty standard. Yeah, it ain't just your dad's mana dork, but it's really cute. Okay, I'll say that much.
You know what? It is cute enough that we keep bringing that up because it is noteworthy. Yeah. It is. And honestly, as far as 2 mana dorks go, it's quite good. All right, so at some point, we're going to stop talking about, like, the green-red dino thing. At some point. Now is not that point, I'm afraid. I have one other dinosaur that I need to talk about because I have so many thoughts on this one. Colossal Dreadmaw was introduced in Rivals of Ixalan and became the ultimate meme. It's kind of you know what? I'm going to go ahead and say it. Colossal Dreadmaw is the perfect green creature. It is a 6/6 trampling dinosaur for 4 green. It is just, and that's it. In limited, it is a very strong curve topper. Outside of that, it is basically unplayable. It is just stats with trample, go. And it's become this joke. It's become this meme. I know people did like March of the Machine crossovers with Dreadmaw and Stormcrow, and it's delightful. Like, those kind of things make me very happy. And so everybody assumed, it's funny, watching the preview stream, when they did like the first reveal preview stream, I was in the chat on Twitch, and all of the chat messages that kept going, like, Colossal Dreadmaw, is this Dreadmaw? Are they giving us Dreadmaw? Like, everybody, the meme is so strong with that card. It is unreal. And they gave us a Dreadmaw in this set, in Earthshaker Dreadmaw, which is a 6/6 trampling dinosaur for 4 green. Carlo, I see you shaking your head, and you're correct. I'm right there with you. When Earthshaker Dreadmaw enters the battlefield, draw a card for each other dinosaur you control.
Great. My Earthshaker Dreadmaw dies to Shieldred triggers. Like, it's actually functionally worse than Colossal Dreadmaw versus any Shieldred deck.
I hadn't even considered that, but you're right, actually. Like, I just need to put this body online. Oh crap, I'll draw 3 cards and that kills me. No. But if Children of the Apocalypse is not online, like, that is one fringe case that is absolutely valid.
Listen, this card is probably great for limited. It's 10 times better than
this card is like bonkers for limited,
very, very
right?
good.
Like, holy crap.
Well, and honestly, that's what I don't like about it. They gave us a playable Dreadmaw. No. The whole joke was the Dreadmaw was unplayable. That was what made it fun. What is this?
I was rioting a bit after the stream where they didn't even reveal this card.
I know. They could have given us a Dreadmaw and like talked about how much we want Colossal Dreadmaw. Yeah, exactly. And I can't imagine they're going to give us 2 6/6 trample 6-drops at the uncommon slot. Like, I can't imagine they're going to, So, in any event, we have a new Dreadmaw.
Vanilla dinosaurs.
It is significantly better, and it makes me sad because it is significantly better. It does instantly replace Colossal Dreadmaw, like in any older formats. Not that it sees any play outside of maybe Commander, but even then, you know, it's funny. The people who are including Colossal Dreadmaw in their Commander decks right now will not swap it out for this because they're doing it for the meme factor.
Right.
It's the same reason I run Stormcrow in my bird deck. Because when you play it, people are like, is that a Stormcrow? It's like, yes, it is.
Hey, listen, I was trying to poke at Gavin Verhey on Twitter saying, hey, tell me that you actually printed the test card, then Dreadmaw's 8 from the Unknown event into this set. Because it literally was a Storm card that made 6/6 Colossal Dreadmaw tokens. And so I
so
not
much.
only was disappointed at the reveal stream that we didn't get that card, but then also in seeing this card after, I'm like, it ain't it.
Yep. It's one of those things. It is unquestionably better, but it's like when it's like when a relative tries to make you know, like your grandma's famous whatever recipe, and it's like it's not the same. No, it's this, and it can even taste better, but it's not gonna do it for me the same way. You know, it can't. Yeah, and yeah, here we are. Again, the card is genuinely good. Like, it's quite strong. And, like, if you're doing Dino decks, could you imagine dropping Galta, like, casting out Galta, free dropping this, drawing multiple cards off it? Like, the potential is nuts. It absolutely is. But,
At least they kept it at common, right? This is common.
It's uncommon.
It's uncommon. Now it's definitely
uncommon.
worse. My God.
Yeah, that's the thing too. That's another joke that a lot of people have made that is very real. This particular set symbol has a ton of black ink in it, and and a lot of like little thin spindly bits. And as a result, the commons versus the uncommons, it is almost indistinguishable. And there have been multiple times, especially on red cards, where trying to distinguish between like the gold of a rare versus the orange of a mythic is almost impossible. There have been rares that I looked at and I thought they were like uncommons even. Like it's so hard to read. Fortunately, they have a letter in the lower left corner that can tell you.
Yes, the collector numbers.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, next to the collector number, you'll see for uncommons, you'll see a little U down there. Yeah, so keep an eye out on that. And then for rares and mythics, you also have the hollow foil. But yeah, anyway. But yes, that's a whole thing. So limited. I know a lot of limited players are like, is this common? Is this uncommon? Am I going to be able to pick this? I don't know. Yeah, it's a whole thing. All right. Okay, so now we can stop talking about dinosaurs for a second. I don't know. We might go back, knowing me, but. I don't know. Are there any other cards that you were hoping to see here, Carlo? Are there any that we haven't touched on that you want to dive into?
Well, I think if there's any that we need to dive into next, it's got to be like more of the white cards, right? And I think the first card we probably should talk about is actually probably one of the best removal spells printed in some time, and that is in Get Lost. This card is 1 and a white. It is an instant. It says, destroy target creature, enchantment, or planeswalker. Its controller creates 2 map tokens. And map tokens are an artifact that has pay 1, tap, and sacrifice it. Target creature you control explores. But you can only activate that ability as a sorcery. And so, taking a look at this card, in comparison to the current 2-mana white removal spell we have in Standard, which is Fateful Absence, that would have rotated had Standard stayed on the right sort of curve. This is a clear replacement for that, right?
100%.
And you can tell that. But the question is it better than Fateful Absence? Fateful Absence destroys only a creature or planeswalker and then gives the controller a clue token, which is pay 2 mana, sacrifice it, and draw a card. So the map tokens, are they better or worse than clues? Getting 2 of them versus 1, right? So you figure that increases like bargain fodder on bargain cards from Eldraine, right?
Or if cards count artifacts for any reason, you have now multiple of them. Yep.
And the fact that it also can hit an enchantment, which is pretty huge, because that means Get Lost hits cards like Leyline Binding, Virtue of Persistence, Virtue of Loyalty, which are all very strong. You can even destroy an Up the Beanstalk on 2 mana, so pretty early to deny that card advantage. So I think, in my opinion, Get Lost is much better than Fateful Absences. One, because of the additional target possibility. Two, because map tokens are not as strong as clue tokens, especially when you only play them on a sorcery, and you have to also have a creature in play to be able to explore, right?
Yeah, I agree. When I first saw this card, I was like, yeah, this is like one of the best removal spells I think they've ever printed. Like, it gets rid of 3 different permanents, and then it gives them a card that just like doesn't really matter. Um, you get 2 maps, but you're right. Like, against control, you don't care. You give them maps all day. They don't play creatures. Even against aggro decks, like you give them maps like, I don't know. I like, exploring isn't as good as drawing a card. It's just not. Sure, exploring gives you a little bit more options, but
And you might draw them like two lands off of this. Like that's kind of the, I don't know. Is that even a good state necessarily? I don't know. It's tough to tell. You know. Yeah. So no, I'm inclined to agree. I think that, I don't know. It's this card is just good, right? Like it's just this is just a good card.
yeah, it's got to be like one of the
Bottom
best
line.
like removal spells I think they've ever done. I mean, this is nuts. Like, I think this card's gonna get played in like almost every format. Main deck or sideboard is just one of those cards you're just gonna see a lot. You're gonna what was the one card? The counter spell that you foretelled. What was it called? Oh man, it had that name that everyone just knew.
Saw it coming.
Saw it coming.
Yeah.
And this is like, oh, is my creature gonna get lost? It's like,
100%. Yeah.
Yep, your creature's gonna eat the removal spell. Your creature's gonna get lost. And
if your Sheoldred could get lost, I'd appreciate it. Yeah.
yeah, you're gonna hope that. There is one thing though, Ham. You make a good point bringing up Sheoldred. This is a way to get around Sheoldred, right? Like, usually, if they clued your creature and you tried to redraw and the Sheoldred was down, obviously you're gonna take some damage for that. But now exploring gets around Sheoldred, and maybe you can make your creature big enough to kill that Sheoldred in combat. So
yeah,
it's possible.
Those are like some of the upsides I think of the map tokens. But other than that, I mean, this card's just like, even, I don't know, like, would you play this card in a control deck? Like, the aggro player kind of has to spend mana to use it, and then what if they whiff? Yeah, they hit 2 lands and they might draw like a gas spell, but they also just spent like their turn trying to pump up their card, considering you can only activate this as a sorcery. So I actually think that this card is just A+ all around. I think this card's just nuts at 2 mana. Like,
honestly, I mean, we're in a situation where you can really argue that Destroy Evil, being able to blow up enchantments, merits main deck inclusion these days. Like, you can seriously make an argument that like a 2 of that in the main is not bad because it will find targets one way or another.
You can see a lot of the Esper decks that are playing Destroy Evil right now in the main to be able to deal with other Rafine, Sheoldred, and Leyline Binding, and this fits right in that spot.
Leyline Binding, Wedding Announcement, Virtue of Persistence, Up the Beanstalk, like you mentioned. Like, there are so many strong enchantments in Standard right now. They're seeing tons of play. Like, honestly, right now, Disenchant is legal in Standard, and I would seriously consider running that specifically to target enchantments. This does that so much better and provides just perfect flexibility. I love it. I think this card's phenomenal. And yes, no, the joke potential with that name, 100%. That's gonna happen. Yeah, we're all streamers here. We get it. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think we're definitely gonna see that card quite a bit, and I think it's pretty much gonna be like, I don't know. I feel like that card really pushes White. You know, it really gives White like a quintessential removal spell that White hasn't really ever had, outside of like maybe like a Path of Swords, Prismatic Ending. But these are all cards that get played in Modern. Sure, Path had its time in Standard, but I mean, I'm interested to see if this card gets played in all kinds of decks, because I feel like maybe some people might be scared to play it early and then maybe realize later that the drawback on the card, the biggest drawback of the card, is that they get an artifact and the fact that it's a token. So those 2 things could potentially be abusable. It's not even that the token's good that you're giving them.
Not necessarily.
Right? Like, the token that you're giving them just feels, we could be wrong. Obviously, whenever there's a set and there's that one free token, like the enchantment, the clue, the blood token, the decay token, we all kind of like push it off a little bit.
They're easy to write off.
Value is huge, right? Like,
they can
being able to spend mana in the game, as long as the game is progressing, is massive. And I think that that's going to be like a big deal for potentially these map tokens kind of like whether or not they push this card out of getting played. But
Right.
I mean, look, they put the card in a showcase. It's got to get played, right?
They did. Yep. Yeah. I
Gotta be a
had
good
to pull up
card,
the
right?
showcase art for those watching the video here because it's lovely. Yeah. And also, this is a great example of a card where it's very difficult to tell. You may be wondering what rarity is this based on that.
Common.
You honestly, based the
me, it
normal
looks
art,
like a
I
common.
100% thought common.
Yeah.
Look at that, but no, it is actually a rare. This is a rare, much like.
Can you
Faithful
imagine
Essence
this
of
card
Fire.
a common? Holy smokes!
When I looked
outta
at it
here.
and didn't look for that letter, that's what I thought. I was like, no
like,
way.
what?
They printed this card as a common. And somebody had to point out to me, no, it's gold. It's got the R at the bottom. And I'm like,
Okay.
no way I know, unless I open it up out of the booster pack and it's all the way in the back. Like,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. If it took me a minute to get here, then I'll know it's rare. Yeah.
I got something that I think we should talk about. And
Yeah, fire
that's,
away.
Descent. I think that there's a couple cards. The first one is Terror Tide. So Terror Tide's 2 colorless, double black sorcery. All creatures get -X/-X until on a turn, where X is the number of permanent cards in your graveyard. And then we also have Stalactite Stalker, which is a 1-mana 1/1 with menace. At the beginning of end step, if you descended this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Stalactite Stalker, and then you can sack it for 3 mana to give a creature -X/-X. So essentially, we get 2 cards in the black color pie that are removals that have to do with cards hitting the graveyard or cards that are already in your graveyard. Let's start off with the board wipe. What do you guys think about Terror Tide? Is the fact that graveyard hate is so prevalent, could be prevalent again? Is that going to hold a card like Terror Tide down, especially when they know that you're playing cards that have to do with the Descent ability?
It'll be interesting to see. I think if self-mill strategies can be viable, Terror Tide becomes phenomenal.
Yeah.
I love my my Lurgoyf decks. I love my self-mill
old
big
stick
value.
Fingers.
I love my Descend and Stick Fingers together. Oh, let's go. They're gonna actually the moment they revealed how the Descent works, I used my terrible Photoshop skills to actually put together a Stick Fingers with a miner helmet going in. It's very dumb.
Right.
If I think to edit this in, the folks on the video will see it below me here. But anyway, it's very silly because it's perfect. Like the Descent mechanic. Basically just caring about either the permanents that are in the graveyard or permanents hitting the graveyard. Self-mill strategies are obviously just going to supercharge these like crazy. The other thing I love is that it counts permanent cards, and that includes lands. So your Blossoming Tortoise kind of setups, all of a sudden, those matter in a pretty cool way. So you could run a very land-heavy deck, with your Blossoming Tortoises and maybe even Soul of Windgrace. Like maybe there's a way to, go Jund land. I don't know. It's a fun idea, right? Like there might be something there. I think Terror Tide could be phenomenal because right now the graveyard hate that exists is that sees play are cards like Lord Skitter, Cemetery. What is it? Not Desecrator.
Trespasser.
Trespasser.
Yeah, Trespasser, Hearse.
Yep.
Herb
Hearse is
Lord,
out there right now.
Scavengers.
Right now, Hearse is actually not seeing much play just because Skitter and the Graveyard Trespasser are so good as just 3-drop creatures, and they incidentally hit graveyards. And so right now, being able to pick off a Memory Deluge or being able to, snipe that reanimation target away from your opponent is enough. Right now, wholesale, mass graveyard hate isn't something that a lot of people are interested in, unless you're going up against the mono blue deck. And that's where Hearse comes in, because Hearse can take huge chunks out of somebody's graveyard really quickly. And which, the mono blue decks, I love being on the 10th turn of a game and looking over at my opponent who has 2 Haughty Djinns live and they're both 0/4s. That makes me so happy. It's just 10 out of 10.
What do you think about our other little friend then? What do you think
Yeah.
about the Stalactite Stalker?
So
Do
Stalactite
you
Stalker?
think that the Stalker is... You know what it reminds me of? This Doctor Who card. It's like Vrasha, whatever it's called. It's like a 3-mana 1/1, and then end step, it gets a +1/+1 counter. That card does have Shadow and Indestructibility, but this card has Menace. And obviously, so what I'm thinking of with a lot of these types of decks is Anvil. The first thing that comes to my mind is a Sacrifice deck, right? There's also other cards in this set that definitely have a lot more of that feel as well. And I think
Yeah.
that this little guy kind of just like can get there, right? It's a 1 mana 1/1, and then later on, like let's say that your opponent's trying to kill it, then you can just sack it to kill one of your creatures or one of your opponent's creatures.
Yeah.
And I mean, overall, I mean this card definitely has a little bit of like a Blood Tithe Harvester type feel, where you're going to get some value out of it slowly, and then later on you're just going to be like, all right, yeah, I'm just going to kill your one card because I can.
Pretty much. Yeah, and if this goes unchecked, it can get very large. You're right, like Anvil style decks where you're doing that aristocrat kind of shenanigans can work very, very well with this. The one thing about Descend that I do want to call out is that it has to be permanent cards going to the graveyard. So sacrificing tokens to like trigger Anvil and the like will not trigger Descend. So that's something to keep in mind. However, like things like the synthesizer, the red synthesizer from Kamigawa, like that all of a sudden triggers this. You have like, you can use creatures like the Iron Apprentice in those decks to, that would absolutely count, that kind of thing. So it's not hard, I don't think, to trigger this. And it's a 1/1 with Menace for 1. It's even a rogue, if that's of interest. It's a rogue and a goblin. Like, it's two relevant creature types in some older formats where maybe you want to brew around that. I do think this card is, I mean, it costs 1. What more do you want for 1 mana? I do like it a lot, actually. It kind of reminds me of Ravenous Squirrel from Modern Horizons. Granted, that one triggered every single time you sacrifice something. Totally different ballgame. That I watched the food deck get to a 12/12 for 1 constantly. Like, it happened all the time. This isn't quite that strong because you can only get 1 counter per turn. And only, if a card was put in your graveyard. But that's if a permanent card was put in your graveyard from anywhere. So if you discarded something, if you sacrificed a creature or, any other kind of card that you have lying around, if you milled one, I mean, that's not hard. Honestly, if you sacrificed a Saga because it hit the 3rd chapter or something, like that would trigger this. So it's not hard to get there. I don't think at all, actually, if you build your deck with these kind of effects in mind. And this is your 1-drop, could be fantastic, because you could be swinging with a 3/3/4/4 very quickly, like before your opponent's really ready for it with this little guy, and that's fun. I dig him. And like you're saying, later in the game when you have 3 mana lying around, this could just be a removal spell. So sweet, you love to see it. Yeah, I'm all here for it.
Yeah. So another card I think that I was like pretty excited for. In blue, actually, I don't know. Did you guys talk about the Deeproot Pilgrimage? Was this a card that was discussed last week?
I don't believe so.
Was this out at the time? So, Deeproot Pilgrimage, blue, colorless, enchantment. Whenever one or more non-token merfolk you become tapped, you control become tapped. Create a 1/1 blue merfolk token with hexproof. Raise intruder alarm, guys. There is a combo here that you can do almost infinitely with this and, like, I don't know, just any vehicle or any way to tap your merfolk, and then you can just continually keep untapping them and making infinite creatures, and then before you know it, your opponent's looking at you like, is this Splinter Twin again? In all honesty, what's really funny is in Modern, like, you can win pretty quick with that deck. Like, you just play like any old like 1-drop merfolk, play this, and then play Intruder Alarm, and then if your opponent has no counter spells and no way to interact, then you just make like infinite creatures, and most of the time no one's playing board wipes. They're playing Fury, but I don't think 1 Fury is going to beat like 1,000 merfolk. So that might be a problem. Oh yeah, and they got hexproof. So
they got hexproof, baby. Yeah.
Okay, in all seriousness, I do think that this card is like really, really powerful for only 2 mana. It makes a lot of creatures. This is a card that could potentially push the merfolk deck back into the limelight. A little unlikely. In standard, there is a merfolk that was spoiled that essentially is like a Tidebind Mage type effect, if anybody remembers that card. But there are some merfolk in the set that are pretty good. I think it's going to be a lot harder to make it work in standard. You're really going to need those vehicles to kind of, or like other type tap effects to really push this card. But at 2 mana, there's a lot of upside to like about this card, right?
Oh, absolutely. No, and I think you're right. Like, in standard, it's kind of interesting because in Dominaria United, they gave us that Merfolk Lord, and it was funny because at the time it was just like, okay, what do we do with this? Like, what do you what do you want me to do with this? And now that we're going back to Ixalan and we're seeing more Merfolk, and there have been a handful of other Merfolk that have been printed that are like fine, but all of a sudden being able to, honestly, the thing about trying to do Merfolk in standard right now is there isn't a consistent like mechanical identity for that creature type.
That's what I was about to say.
Yeah.
I don't know that this is playable in standard at all. There's like plenty of other things we're trying to do on 2, whether it's like hold a removal spell or play a card like Blood Tithe Harvester or a ramp effect or something like this.
And a lot of the tempo things are like your Fairy Masterminds or those kind of cards that you want to be flashing in.
Yeah. I mean, maybe, what I would hope for, like seeing a card like this in this set, is that future sets are going to have Merfolk creatures, and hopefully the archetype is able to be built throughout like the next couple of sets or something like this. I also looked at this card like maybe from a modern lens. Like, does this make it into the modern Merfolk deck that like people play occasionally, but coincidentally had like one of the best records out of like the last couple Swiss modern tournaments that mattered, even though didn't maybe like make it to top 8 or something like this, I guess.
Well, I think they bombed out in the draft portion, right?
Yeah, in the draft portion, it was like the best.
So it's always kind of hard to dictate. Like I think the Merfolk deck is really good. I think it's like it's kind of almost like ready for the format. The only cards obviously that beat it are like Solitude and Fury, but you can almost beat a Fury by playing like 2 Lords, and then all of a sudden your whole squad's like 3/3s or 4/4s. It makes it a lot harder for them to Fury you out. So I don't know. I'm not really sure, honestly. You really need something that keeps your creatures tapping. So I'm looking for maybe like an enchantment that taps your opponent's lands, maybe something that taps to draw cards. There is that 3-drop blue-green Merfolk from one of the Zendikar sets or something like that you tap 7 untap Merfolk and you draw some cards or something like that. And so that could be like a possibility. And then that card makes a token, so then you get if you have like the alarm again. So I think that this card though is strictly like either like a pretty decent value card for Merfolk if you can find a way to tap your cards, or it's just a combo card where you play the Intruder Alarm or whatever the card's called, and you essentially make infinite creatures and either find a way to give them haste or your opponent can't stop you. So at that point you win that way. Other than that, I mean, I agree with you guys 100%. This card is going to be in standard for 3 years. So in 3 years, I'm seriously hoping that they print some Merfolk, even though they didn't print Merfolk for like years in between, like since the last Zendikar set, I think. So
yeah, I think
we'll
all
see.
this. I mean, this card is able to produce a hex-proof creature in standard. That is rare right now. And so if there is some 1-drop Merfolk that is playable, that you can drop down on 1 into Deep-Root Pilgrimage on 2 and swing 1 time, you produce a Boggle, and then you can take it from there.
So there is the Jade Light Splunker, which is in this set. Granted, you can play it as a 1/1 because it's got X and green and the mana cost. And then it just doesn't explore, and then you play that enchantment and you get the hexproof creature after. But there's also the Merfolk from March of the Machine. It's like 2 mana. It's a 2/3 that surveils when it deals combat damage.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, that card's super strong. Deep Root, something.
Yep, completely forgot about that.
Deep Root, like Soldier or something like that. Like that card's really good, actually. I was really high on that card during early access. Like that card was definitely putting in tons of work for me, ramping me, dealing damage, just doing a lot of things. And you're right, there's some cards here or there that do things for the Merfolk, but ultimately, I think in standard, unless they print other Merfolk, like if there is a set, like the next set's dedicated to it, like, in 3 years they make another set that maybe has some Lords, cards like that, like, I think then it'll get played. But at the end of the day, what, like I keep saying, like what really like is going to determine whether Pilgrimage gets played is like, are there vehicles that we can use to tap? Are there other ways of using these effects so that we could get the tokens? Because if not, then this card is definitely not going to see play in standard. In modern, I think we're bouncing on this over and over again, but modern, this card's just a combo card.
Yeah.
I think that's really about it. Like, you getting a few 1/1s is really not going to make a difference in modern. The deck wins because your cards are unblockable. That's why the deck wins. There, you make your opponent's lands islands, or they already run islands. Play a Lord of Atlantis or one of your other lords, and you just keep attacking them until they're dead. And you make like 3 or 4 5/5s, and the game's like over.
So 2 things real quick. I did forget that there is another green mana Merfolk in this set that's uncommon, and it's the card that I think Gavin Verhey said that they wanted to get in the original Ixalan set, but it didn't fit. And that's Cenote Scout. It is a 1/1 for 1 green. It says when it enters the battlefield, it explores. So you have to hope opponent doesn't have cut down to get it off the battlefield.
Sure.
But it essentially is probably going to be a 2/2 for 1 green. That would help trigger this enchantment on 2 to make a hexproof that can't get cut down.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And the second thing, though, on top of that, is the fact that I guess you could play... Oh, what is that one power creature? Evolving Automaton. Granted, it's not like a merfolk, but it grows
Adaptive?
for the creatures that you play. Adaptive Automaton, is that what it's called?
Evolving Adaptive, I believe is what
Evolving
I'm thinking
Adaptive.
of.
Okay.
From Obi-Wan?
Yes, and so that grows when you play creatures with greater power or toughness.
Yep.
So maybe there can be like this lower to the ground, like blue-green, just like a Simic aggro deck that doesn't have to have the complete like merfolk theme to it. Just to be able to get like cheap creatures out there for early aggro, this creature gets big, type thing.
And I like that because then all of a sudden you'd have access to the counter mana, so that Sunfall can get swatted off the stack. That's huge.
Right.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah, there might be something there.
Yeah,
Very
I think that was like
Yeah.
the card definitely is going to have some implications. I think.
Well, yeah, Deeper Pilgrimage. Good.
Somewhere.
Yeah, it's a good shout because that one is one of those. It could be sneaky, and this also could be one of those cards that we don't see for a while. It happens every time in standard. Like if you've been following it long enough, there will always be a card that comes out to no fanfare and nobody plays it, and then a year later something's going to happen and it unlocks. And I could see Deeper Pilgrimage being exactly that from this set. Maybe there's nothing right now, but just wait. Yeah.
Now we were talking about we were looking at like cards that combo, like that's how we were just talking about that. And there is another card that does have combos with older cards. Maybe we want to talk about it from sort of two sides. But Amalia Benevades Aguirre is a 2/2 vampire scout for white-black. It is a rare with ward, pay 3 life. Whenever you gain life, it explores. Then you destroy all other creatures if its power is exactly 20.
Wow. I mean...
So this is a combo, Carlo. Do you know what the combo is?
Yes, you play it with the uncommon from original Ixalan, right?
Yep.
Yeah, elemental, something elemental.
Thornwood Elemental, is it called?
Yeah. So you play it with that, and that card reads, whenever you explore, you gain 3 life. So then you gain life, and then this card explores again because you gained life. And then when you explore, the elemental gains life. And then when you gain life, I think you guys know where I'm going with that.
We got you.
It's certainly a Splinter Twins situation.
It certainly can be.
That's for sure. It's called Wild Growth Walker.
Mhm.
Is the correct name of the card. It is from Ixalan. Whenever creature you control explores, put a counter on Wild Growth Walker, and you gain 3 life.
Ding ding.
So that then would trigger Amalia, right? Whenever you gain life, it explores, and then back and forth. Very interesting.
This card is going to end some Commander games.
Oh, 100%.
I think I can say that much, is that this card will definitely be ending Commander games very quickly.
I just gotta say, I am just so glad for the sake of like Pioneer and Modern that there isn't some instant speed 4-mana way to get both of these onto the battlefield at the same time. Oh my goodness, could you imagine?
Wait. Damn, have I got a card for you. Grab your friends, it's time to collect our company.
No! Yeah, no, it's another collected company combo.
You can throw Heliod in there too if you
and
want.
you're gaining life, so you get Heliod of the Oak in here
to.
too.
Yeah.
Get in. I mean, right now there's so many small creatures that do infinite combo stuff. In fact, sure, add another one to the mix. Why not? It gets silly. It's not Yeah, it's at this point it's funny because actually these two by themselves are not an infinite 2-card combo. They generate an engine, but you do need something to kick it off. You do still need something else to get it started. That said, all you need to do is explore or gain life, and you're off to the races. Both of which are very easy to do. So I'm not saying that it's going to be hard to pull these off, but you do need need the spark to get it all started.
You just play the soul. You just play Lunark Veteran, Ham. Like,
yep. That would do it. Yes.
You just play Lunark Veteran on turn 1. You turn 1 Lunark. You play your Amalia, and then you play, the elemental, whatever it's called, and then, I mean, at this point though, your opponent has no creatures, so you're really trying hard to kill that one card that they potentially have in play, but you are going to be left with a 20/20.
Yep, exactly. So that's
the thing.
That's kind of the idea. Is like you explore enough times with Amalia that your top deck is gonna be set, whatever you want it to be. You have it, and you probably have a fistful of lands, and then. You blow everything up and you have a 20/20 just chilling on board.
I got the turn 3 win. Okay. So you just play Lunark Veteran.
Yep.
You play Amala. Then on turn 3, you play the Elemental and you play that new adventure card that's you play Thud with your last mana.
Oh, yeah, Burn Together off the Callous Sellsword. Yeah. Yeah. Now, that's all fine and good. I want to make it abundantly clear, everyone. We know that Wild Growth Walker is not standard legal. This is not a standard Splinter
we ain't talking about standard.
This is like Pioneer Explorer, but it's definitely like Pioneer Explorer. That might be a thing. So
we only talk about practice. Not a game.
Not a game.
Practice.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that I don't even think that this is a serious combo. We're kind of just like going off a little bit on a tangent about how fun this is. But this card by itself is actually pretty powerful. Like you gaining life, and then that's just going to happen incidentally. The card already has war. They got to pay 3 life for it. Obviously, if you just like incidentally explore it or incidentally get it bigger, the card's going to be really powerful. And this card ties in with the card kind of that's in getting a reprint that needed a reprint, and that's Resplendent Angel, which 3 mana, 3/3 flying at the beginning of your end step. If you gain 5 or more life, you get a 4/4 Angel. Then for 6 mana, it gets +2/+2 in lifelink. So between Lunark, Resplendent, this card, I feel like Black-White is gonna potentially be a little bit of like that aristocrat-y type style deck again, right, guys?
Oh, I think so. And we're definitely, I mean, there's going to be, like, one thing that I know deep down inside my bones is that arena players love life gain. They love it. We've all been playing arena for entirely too long now. The client's been around for 5 years. I don't know about you guys, but like, there are certain things that are just true in this world, and one of them is that newer players will gravitate towards the life gain deck.
The play queue has red deck wins, or the play queue is a life gain angel deck.
It's some kind of life gain angel deck. Exactly. It is what it is. The Ajani's Pride Mate is one of those cards that is in, I believe, one of the starter decks, or like has been in the past, and players just realize like, oh, I get a counter every time. It gets so big. This is awesome. And so I see the appeal for like newer players getting into the game. Makes perfect sense. And so it's like one of the first decks that people really gravitate towards. Resplendent Angel has been a key piece of those decks for a long time. And so the fact that it's coming back to standard at a time when Lunark Veteran is around and Voice of the Blessed is still around as well.
It is.
I will be shocked if we do not see some flavor of life gain deck. But you're exactly right. With Amalia in the mix, it might be a white-black deck primarily, not white, like not mono-white or white-green like we often see it in the past. So, I don't know, it's interesting. But also, yeah, this Resplendent Angel, the card definitely need a reprint. I'm of the opinion that the card is like stupid push. Like if you get this in draft, you just win. Like it just does it all by itself. For 3 mana, it's silly. But in any event, like it did need a reprint because it was very expensive. If you're doing any angelic life gain anythings, you just want it.
And you know, coincidentally for standard, I mean, outside of like talking about moving to like a white-black shell, I mean, we get to take advantage of the angels that have not rotated from standard. So like Giada costs 2, which means Resplendent Angel will enter as a 4/4 with Giada out, right? So that puts it out the realm of possibilities of getting Lightning Strike by Mono Red, unless they deal with the Giada. And then, you know, you still have cards like Inspired Angel, also from Capenna, right? That gains you a life and draws a card.
Yep.
You have
Well, the Steel Seraph as well is a
Steel
that's
Seraph
an
gets
angel.
lifelink.
Yep.
You have Archangel of Wrath. And Angels was a pretty popular deck a couple standard rotations ago without this card. And it was mono white, just splashing the red-black lands like the Duels or Sundown Pass or Shattered Sanctum. Shattered Sanctum is the white-black one. Just to pay the kicker on Archangel of Wrath. Yep. So, I mean, this fits right in there. So I'm excited to play this in like an angel-based strategy. There's also the blue-white deck that you could play. Era and Giada cost blue mana, which lets you cast this off the top of the deck, which is pretty nice. And what's going to be interesting is now that we get Cavern Souls in Ixalan, we can assure that these cards aren't countered by your more control variant decks. Still got to worry about cards like Sunfall, but I think like this plus Cavern Souls makes the Angel deck very, very viable in Standard.
Yeah, speaking of the white-black deck too, we could just jump here to Veto, which is getting a new card in the set, and this card does everything in combination with the other two cards. So you curve out with all three of these cards, and you find some fodder to sacrifice. And then Veto is a 4-mana 4/4 flyer, so already great on stats on curve. Whenever you sacrifice another permanent, gain 2 life. If it's the first time, if it's the second time, each opponent loses 2 life. If it's the third time, you make a 4/3 white and black vampire demon with flying. So Veto gives you fodder, gives you life for the explore, and punishes your opponent. And then if you gain enough life, you can maybe get an angel on top of that to give you more fodder. So I really, really think that this white-black aristocrat deck is gonna be around, especially with some of the cards that we already have in the format, like Tenacious Underdog, a card that you don't mind sacrificing, Razorlash Transmogrant, cards like this. You can even splash red, and then you can start to play cards like the Anvil, like we talked about. There's all kinds of different cards that I think that you can play with these abilities. And don't even forget Map Token Sacrifice, Blood Token Sacrifice. There's all these other cards
permanent.
There's all these other cards that work very splendid with cards like Veto and some of these other cards that we're talking about. Carlo, it's cooking.
Hear me out. We still have, speaking of vampires and angels, Drana and Linvala is in Standard, which turns off activated abilities. And Lisa Forgotten Archangel is 5 mana, and that's an Innistrad. And it says when another non-token creature you control dies, return it to the hand.
I'm telling you, play Braids with that too and draw some cards while you're at it. Sack your creatures, get them back with the Lisa.
This is all ridiculous, and I love it. Oh, this is all my kind of nonsense.
I love black-white.
Just FYI for everybody listening or watching this podcast, the streamer event, formerly known as Early Access, is on November 9th. So, I don't just talk about this nonsense. We play it. So make sure to tune in to our channels on those days, because we're definitely slamming these cards in some decks.
Yeah, hop on over to the MagicJank team channel there. I believe we're all in it at this point. Just, if at any point you're like, hey, I wonder what people are doing with Ixalan, start there, see whoever's live, and just jump in. You're going to have a great time, I promise. Anyway, cannot wait. It's going to be silly fun. Yeah, so no, this is all great. And that deck also benefits from a card that I want to point out. Because honestly, I am shocked that they printed this. I'm genuinely shocked. And as someone, when pressed, I depending on the day and depending on my mood, if someone asks, what is your favorite creature in all of Magic? There's a non-zero chance I would say Nantuko Husk.
Oh, yeah.
Wow, that's a good choice too. That card's powerful.
It's classic, right? Yeah, it's a great card, and that was one of the times I was playing back when damage was on the stack. I did some nonsense with that. Where I was like, man, sacrifice is an upside. Who knew? And it turns out it still is an upside, and we now have Bartolomé del Presidio, which I'm sure I butchered that. I'm just gonna call this dude Bart. Or if I'm feeling silly, Bort, just because I enjoy that.
It's Presidio. Bartolomé del Presidio.
Bartolomé del Presidio. Something like that, right? Anyway, it's funny. Actually, okay, this has nothing to do with anything. Apropos of nothing. I don't know about you guys, but when I'm looking through these spoilers, it is very common when looking through Magic Spoilers to find one that is in a foreign language, like because they let creators of all languages spoil cards. Great, love it. Like, I'm glad they do that. But as a result, it's not uncommon when somebody shows the card for the first time that it be in a foreign language, and you can usually tell when you read the title. I cannot tell you how many times I have looked at a title and it was clearly like inspired by a Mesoamerican pronunciation or something, and I thought, oh, I'm looking at the Spanish card. And then I go down to the text box and it's actually the English one. It's like, oh, wait, no.
I love it so much.
It's cool, don't get me wrong. I like it a lot,
set.
but it's like spoiler season, it's throwing me for a loop here.
I love it. Like I was so happy when I found out that this is what they were gonna do with the set. Like it made me so happy, and like, oh, it's so cool to see Spanish on these cards, and like, it's just like, guys, it really gets me in like the feels, and it's just like, for me, I just think it's like really special, and I'm really enjoying one of my favorite places in Magic. Like, I loved the first two Ixalan sets. I call them Rixalan, but I loved Rixalan. Like, I loved drafting it. I loved playing those cards in Standard, and to have all this going on, these like kind of like old themes and everything, and just it's so cool. And like, you're right, seeing a card like Abuelo, I'm like, hey, I know Abuelo, that's my granddad,
right?
And it's like, oh, that's so cool that like they're actually throwing these cards in just like we would already know them in the regular English language, right? Like, we spend so much time around a lot of like our Spanish friends, like, and like, obviously I'm culturally, Hispanic as well, so it's, so cool to like get all this added into this set. And just in Magic in general, it really shows how far they've come with like, not to go off on something, but I really compare this to like the Universes Beyond, where they really have finally started to just be like, we're just going to hit the gas. Like, this is the theme. This is the set. This is what we're doing. We're going to hit the gas. We're going to get the gas so hard that the people who really love it. Like, they're going to really want this set, right? Like, they're going to really want these cards. Like, these cards don't even have to be that great, and I want them. My wife's going to want them because they're in Spanish and they're cool cards. Like, and it's just, I really think that if there's one thing that I really want to highlight about this set, is that they're hitting the flavor. The power level of this set's through the roof. The flavor of this set's through the roof. I really, really think that this is one of those sets that's just going to be successful. Like, automatically out of the gate, this set just has everything going for it.
Yeah.
For everybody.
Yeah, 100%. And I totally agree. Like, the original Ixalan, it had these cultural elements, but it never felt like the focus. It's like, the vampires had the conquistador armor and the buildings were like ziggurats and stuff. It's like, all right, like, it's there if you look for it. But like with this set, they're really doubling down and they're making it a focus and they're really putting it in your face. And I love that. Yeah. No, I think it's great. And like the art styles and everything, like they clearly had a number of like consultants on staff when they were designing it to make sure that they got it all right. And
even the artist, someone mentioned on Twitter today, the artist for the gods, the art for the gods.
Yeah.
One of them, like, I believe has like a representation essentially of the god that they're based off. Like, the blue one's supposed to be Quetzalcoatl, or I believe is the name of it.
Quetzalcoatl,
so, like,
Yep.
There's just like I really feel, I know we talk about this all the time. We bring it up like almost like every other podcast, but I think for almost 2 years in a row, they have seriously made a really good standard set. I think almost every standard set has been like a out of the park flavor. There's like some really good cards for everybody. Like, in this set's like the culmination of it, where like so many bangers so far. Every card we talked about is like a banger. And like, what I really like about this set is that it has the potential to bring all these new decks into the format, right? There's at least 3 or 4 decks that we legitimately think like, there could be a Dino deck. Yeah, this black-white sacrifice deck looks really good. Yeah, there's Cascade in the set. Like, oh my goodness, there's so much to be excited for. And there's so many powerful cards coming in that I'm going to be shocked if this set only has like 5 cards in Standard. Like, there's no way it's going to be just Beanstalk and like a couple other cards, right? Like,
this it's not going to just be Restless Cottage and
Restless Cottage, the Dreadmoss Knight, and that's pretty much it. Like, they did make a new deck, but I think that this set specifically is like over the top powerful.
100%. Well, and I completely agree, because what we saw with Wilds of Eldraine, which is generally considered a success, because it was going into a very well-established standard. And it's very often what you see is like the decks don't actually shake up necessarily. the list kind of shifted a little bit and maybe make room for 1 or 2 new pieces, and that's about it. You don't really see a big thing. And the Golgari deck coming out of nowhere, like, we're not really out of nowhere, but like the Dread Knight and the Restless Cottage are enough of an engine to really kind of supercharge some other cards that weren't seeing play, and that became a thing now. Great, we love to see it. But yeah, the decks we're talking about right now, we're talking about like green-based aggro decks featuring dinosaurs. That's not a thing, like, right now, not at all.
Green in standard? Nah, not in this economy.
Unless you're watching Carlos stream, of course, in which case Tyrann X and whatnot is coming out.
We're there right there with you. Green mages at heart.
and if you're on my stream, Metali's coming down, but that's a whole other thing. In any event, but these decks that we're talking about right now, like, these are new archetypes, and the cards look good enough to hang with what's going on right now. So I'm excited to see what people try and to see what ends up bubbling up. And I do believe, speaking of just bangers, so Bart here is a 2/1 for 2. It's white and black. Sacrifice another creature or artifact. : Put a opposing counter on Bartolome del Presidio. The reason I call it that colon there is anybody out there who has ever played a game with a free sacrifice outlet. All my Nantuko Husk, all my Carrion Feeder fans out there, I see you. I am I'm one of you. We all know how good that is. Being able to trigger death triggers at a whim is super powerful. This allows you to supercharge veto if you have creatures lying around. Go nuts. Like, this is going to get silly. And on top of that, we have a ton of creatures in standard right now that have death triggers that are getting absolutely stuffed by exile effects. The floor on this is that Bartolome answers all of those. It's like, oh, you want a Leyline Binding by Dread Knight? In response, I sack it. Oh, you're going to Sunfall? In response, I sack my board. Right. You know, and so all of a sudden, I get all my death triggers, so like my Junjis, my Atsushis, my whatever I have lying around, are all going off, and your Incubator token is now significantly smaller than it would have been otherwise. Like, yes, with the side of yes. I love this card.
And I like that it says sack another creature or artifact.
Yes!
So that means these map tokens that my opponents give me that I can't really use so much, I can just chuck them to this, and I'm going to have a bigger vampire. It's pretty good. Yeah.
The lack of a mana investment. Honestly, this could have been sacrifice another creature or artifact, : you lose 1 life. I'm still playing it. Like, free sack is so good. It is so good.
This and all will be one in the Anvil deck. Let's go. I'm ready.
Let's go.
Just gonna put this all be one, get some free sacks, get some tokens, get some more life drain in there. Find some card that makes them lose a life whenever a card hits the graveyard or something. There's got to be one of those cards. Somewhere in standard. We also have Edgar. Edgar is a black-white card that can maybe go on the deck. Like, I think that this is a deck. This is one of those decks where, like, you're like, oh yeah, they printed like 20 good vampires. There's going to be a vampire deck. This deck's like, oh yeah, they printed like 20 good sacrifice cards to go with these 10 other really good sacrifice cards. So there's got to be a deck, right? Like,
oh yeah,
there's got to be a deck somewhere.
I've been doing some Mardu Vamp action already. After this set, shut it down. You know, it's gonna get out of hand.
What card really like spikes in playability is Markov Baron from Aftermath.
Yes.
Right? Because that gives all vamps +1/+1, and the card has lifelink and it has Convoke. So as long as we can play some cheapy vampires, which there are a ton of between the Innistrad sets and what they are printing in this set. So now those two vampire decks get to sort of meld with each other, which is pretty interesting.
This is one of the few times where no rotation actually helps an older archetype, and this is the first time I think that this is happening, where we get some creature types that already go with creature types that exist.
Yeah,
like I said, Edgar Markov is in standard, so you could play that 100%. Card with these cards.
Yeah,
Sorin is a good planeswalker that does vampire abilities. It's a good card. It could go with this deck. Like, we all know Shieldred, you just put it in the deck. It's got black, you play it in the deck. I mean, that card's great. I mean,
and you know, speaking of another really strong vampire that's in this set at Mythic is Blood Letter of Aklat.
Yes.
Aklazot. I don't know if I pronounced that right.
But yeah, I think that's what it is.
It's 1 and triple black for a 2/4 flying. If an opponent would lose life during your turn, they lose twice that much life instead. And this card seems like a great curve out at 4 to play this. So your little vampires do double damage. And let's also, I mean, not that I want to really talk about Shieldred anymore, but bro, if you have this and Shieldred out, somebody's taking 4 life for each card that they draw.
Gross.
So, and that's insane.
We finally broke Shieldred, everybody. We did it.
Yeah, we did it. Yeah, when I first saw this card, I like had to read it twice because I was like, yeah, this is like nuts because this is a card you play on second main phase. You attack.
Mm-hmm.
They're like they look at the board, they maybe move some creatures around, and they're like, yeah, I could probably take the 6 because I'm gonna get 2. And then by the time they finish that sentence, you're like Bloodletter, and they're like, oh, I guess I'm just gonna take 12, go to 4, and then only have a turn to deal with this 2/4 flyer that just automatically kills me the next turn. It's like,
Well,
yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, this has to be on the battlefield before combat, or during combat if you're going to take advantage of that, unless you can flash it in somehow.
Oh, it's not an end step. Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
I'm so sorry.
it's a replacement effect.
Okay.
And so it's all every instance of life loss and damage causes life
wound
loss.
reflection. That's my bad.
Yeah, no, it's all good.
Reflection mindset. Well, either way, you play this before combat.
Yeah,
you attack with
either-
your fiend or something.
There are going to be plenty of moments exactly when the opponent's going to be like, all right, if I block here, yeah, they're doing the math on their side, like, you know, before passing the turn, like, okay, I should be able to block. I'll survive at 3. It'll be okay. And then I got him on the crackback. This is going to be fine. Pass the turn. All right, untap, Bloodletter, swing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, also speaking about another tribe that benefits from Cavern Souls re-entering Standard, between this and Courtyard, I mean, you've got great mana to try to play like a 2 to 3 color vampire deck.
Souls is calling your name, Carlo.
I mean, all of us.
You're gonna cast all your cards for free.
I kind of love. Actually, you're right
with
with Cavern and Secluded Courtyard both. All of a sudden, this Bloodletter. I mean, one of the downsides of it is that it costs 3 black. But all of a sudden, you know, and meanwhile, you're also running Baby Edgar. You've got a lot of the white,
we played
the white black vampires.
Okay? 3 black's nothing. We played Invoke Despair, Ham.
Correct.
We got Invoke Despair banned in Standard.
Yes, and I don't miss it for a second. But we also have like Blood Tithe Harvester, which we know is like that's a known quantity. It's great. Valdarin Epicure is a perfectly serviceable like 1-drop role player. You know. Yeah, and also I do want to make a quick shout out about Markov Barons. It is, I believe, the only card in Standard right now that has Madness, and that works really, 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 really well with blood tokens.
Oh yeah,
because you can discard it, then cast it, and then draw a card. So, because blood tokens didn't rotate, you can take advantage of that. Yeah, stuff can get silly.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things to look forward to. I think with all these cards, specifically for these archetypes, I think the vampires gets a huge push. There's definitely a few spirits as well in here if we're going to talk about like, you know, Midnight Hunt and all that specifically.
Sure.
One of the cards I wanted to touch on here is Brass's Tunnel Grinder. This is a legendary artifact, 2 colorless and a red. Whenever it enters the battlefield, discard any number of cards and draw that many cards +1. At the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, so essentially if a permanent card went to your graveyard, you put a board counter on this card. Then if there are 3 or more board counters, it flips over. When it transforms, you can tap it for red. And when you cast a permanent spell using the mana that this land produced, you get to discover X, where X is that spell's mana value. I really think that this card is obviously really good in the front side, right? For 3 mana in a red deck, your big red deck we talked about, you essentially get to pitch all your dead cards. So this is kind of like a Fable type card, but you get an extra card. It's +1. So you're not card neutral. You're getting an additional, your +1 cards. And then probably going to be pretty easy to flip this card over. You know, you sacrifice a card, you get to descend. So it is going to take 3 turns unless you have a way to proliferate. But either way, there are ways to cheat on the counters. But when it flips over, now any card we play has descend, or excuse me, has cascade.
Discover, which is
Discover. Yeah.
effectively.
So you could set it up. You could set it up so that you have this 1 card in your deck that only discovers into this 1 card in your deck, just like in Modern. So I really think that there's like potential for this in Standard, considering that the front side of the card is good, and then the back side of the card helps you cash your cards later that you drew off the front side, and then you get some extra value by essentially doubling up on your cards. What do you guys think about this card? Obviously, maybe not a 4 of in all decks, but pretty powerful card, right?
I mean, yeah, very interesting build around. I definitely like the idea.
I think the ability to like partially wheel your hand is always powerful. Especially if you are playing like a reanimator type deck. I mean, hey, this is a way for you to just ditch your reanimator targets into the yard, which is always great. Yeah, I mean, I think you definitely can get away with like playing like 2 of this card or something
Mm-hmm.
in your deck.
Yeah. Well, and on top of that, like right now I'm using cards like Blood Fountain or the Collector's Vault as a way to load the graveyard and leave a little bit behind. Using cards like Lich Knight's Conquest is kind of the best use for those kinds of cards. This fits in that deck like a glove if it's, if you're already using red, because it leaves an artifact behind. And you descend the first turn, so it does get 1 counter. So there's a chance that you'll be able to flip it. But even if you don't, you have an artifact lying around that can feed bargain and other effects. And so it's still valuable. Like, yeah, no, this is a cool card. I like it. And we haven't touched on Discover yet, but like we were saying, it's basically Cascade. And the way that it works, so with Discover, cards have a certain Discover value, and they trigger it at different times. With Cascade, if you cast a spell that has Cascade, when you cast it, the Cascade triggers, and you go and find another spell that is, off the top of the deck, so it's at random. So you go until you find a spell with a lower mana value than the one you already cast. That's just how it works. With Discover, you effectively do the same thing. So if you discover 3, for example, you reveal cards from the top of your deck until you reveal a spell with mana value 3 or less, and then you play that spell. And so it's effectively the same as Cascade, except on a lot of cases, Discover triggers when a permanent enters the battlefield or when you activate a triggered ability. The fact that this particular one is on cast as well makes it very Cascade-like, which is different than most of the other Discover effects that we have in the set. But a lot of them are on ETB, which makes them interesting because with Cascade, since it's on cast, if you cast the spell, you get it. So you can't counter the Cascade effect unless you can counter a triggered ability. Whereas in this case, if you play a permanent that has Discover and it gets countered on the stack, you don't get the Discover. Anyway, but that's a bit of a tangent. But yeah, Brass Stone Grinder, cool card. I like it.
It's a good card, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely like an enabler type effect, or just a nice little hand smoother for red, considering there's no more Fable and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Could definitely be worthwhile. Groovy. I feel like that covers a fair amount. I mean, there's plenty more that we can get into.
There's one thing I think we should cover though, and that is the one Planeswalker that's in the set.
Yes, good call. Yep.
Quintorius Can.
With the awesome artwork, Ham, you gotta get.
I know the one.
Which one? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I got you.
That one. Yeah, that's
boom.
There we go.
Yeah, I love. Even if this card's not good, I'm gonna maybe try to get this card for my Transformer deck because it's a multicolor card, and
heck yeah,
this art is just unreal. Like
it's so nice.
It's gonna look so nice in foil.
Yeah.
Oh, can't wait. Yeah.
So let's take a look at Quintorius. So Quintorius is 3 red-white for 4 loyalty. It has a static ability that says whenever you cast a spell from exile, it deals 2 damage to each opponent and you gain 2 life. Okay. The +1 protects itself, gives you a 3/2 red and white spirit token. -3 is Discover 4. So it's going to cast a spell from the top of your deck, but technically exile, which triggers its ability, right? And then -6 is exile any number of target cards from your graveyard. Add a red for each card exiled this way, and you may play those cards this turn.
I do think it's a strong card. It has a really powerful static ability. Discover is a great late game ability. It protects itself because it makes a token. The ultimate's a powerful effect. It makes mana and you can recast your cards. I think the only downside is that it actually doesn't really come in with that much loyalty, and it costs 5 mana. Not really sure what deck this card goes into either, in all honesty. It's not necessarily doing anything crazy. It's doing some really good things, but it's not even doing... It's not like a crazy powerful card. The ultimate might be, potentially, but even then, it's kind of questionable. Like, yeah, you get to ultimate, you might just kill your opponent by casting enough spells, but... ultimates are all like dream scenarios. So if we're basing off like essentially these first 3 abilities, then the card's fine. Like I said, at 5 mana, I'm just not really sure. I really want this card to be played though. I'm a really big fan of that 5-drop slot in standard, and I'm just a really big fan of Discover. The fact that you discover, get to deal some damage, get to gain some life, and there's so many cards that we talked about, right, guys? Were cards that you play from exile, like this plus the dragon. There's a lot, I think, of positivity for Quintorius Canned, whereas I think Ashiok didn't have enough support to really push it. I think that Quintorius is a card that could potentially be filling a role that some of these red or white based strategies don't have right now.
Yeah, so in standard, there's been like a Pia Nalar deck floating around, and I think this slots into that deck pretty perfectly,
100%.
especially considering we have a few different instances that put cards into exile, like Ren's Resolve and Reckless Impulse, and even the adventure side of Questing Druid, right? So let's say that eventually evolves into like a Naya Pia deck that also lets you play Rocco from Aftermath. That let all of these things let you cast cards from exile. So that deck itself doesn't really have a top curve, right? Like it ends at about 4, and it's not going above this. So maybe Quintorius fits in that type of a deck as an alternate way just to start dealing 2 damage, gaining 2 back. And then just attack you with a bunch of Thopters, which sounds fine. And then that -6 in that deck that plays a bunch of cheap spells might be kind of relevant to continue casting those things and triggering Quintorius's ability at the end.
Oh, 100%.
That I can see happening. The question if that's really like competitive in standard, I don't know. But I definitely would want to try that out because it also highlights some of those cards from Aftermath that really haven't been highlighted yet.
100%. Well, and I completely agree. That was exactly where I went with it at first too, because Rocco's going to be putting stuff into exile. That deck already wants to be casting cards out of exile. We obviously have the dragon that's just absolutely silly with this kind of an effect. And the thing that with that Naya Pia deck, because I've played a little bit with it myself and I played against it a handful of times as well, and it feels very, very strong if the Pia can survive for like 3 or 4 turns. And with that being a creature that is vulnerable to cut down, that is an incredibly tall order. And so having an alternate way to close the game in that deck is huge because you're drawing so many cards that are intended to just impulsively draw you cards in the hopes that it's going to just rock out enough Thopters to ultimately win the game, which it can. Again, if Pia survives, it totally can. But having Quint here in the mix as well, even if the opponent can answer Pia, all of a sudden, if Quint can hit, now they're on a massive, clock because that passive doesn't say it triggers only once per turn. And so if you like Questing Druid adventure on, then cast out the Questing Druid, then Reckless Impulse, and then, it's only spells, so it doesn't trigger off the lands that you're playing off out of exile, unfortunately. That might be a little much. But even so, you're getting a 4-point life swing every single time you interact coming out of exile. That deck's doing that a ton anyway.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, it's gonna be silly. So no, I think it's great. I'm also, I mean, y'all know me. Fight rigging Atali is, this is another 5-drop that can fit into that deck and maybe make something happen. I don't know.
Exactly.
And then the -3 could find me a fight rigging or that 6/6 dinosaur we were talking about earlier. And shock my opponent on the way in. Like,
may as well play Jetmir while we're at it too.
Might as well. Why not? Right?
I don't know. Jetmir, Jenny Faye. We're just gonna play all these cards.
Let's go big.
Right?
Why not? Let's get big.
Jenny Faye does go well with the O'Hare that we actually started the cast with. So
I mean, it's true.
We're kind of coming full circle here.
Brought it back. Let's go.
There, because if you have Quintorius into O'Hare, you can make 3/3/2s. And
well, and I gotta say too, just from a lore perspective, like Quint was an awesome character in Strixhaven. Like everybody loves the little elephant, lore hold, guy who is an adventurer by nature, and like he's very much kind of this aspiring Indiana Jones style character. And so it's funny when he was announced, when they revealed that he'll be the Planeswalker in this set. At first I was like, really? What is he? I mean, we knew he got his spark, or at least we assumed he got a spark during the events of March of the Machine. So I was like, why is Quint the guy? And then I saw one piece of artwork where he was like in a tunnel with the whole with all the adventure gear on. It's like, oh yeah, of course. Like the set where they're diving deep underground. Like, of course. Yeah,
this
the adventure
kind of starts my theory that all the Strixhaven schools, those are all going to be the new the face of Magic, is those. I think some of those characters.
Mm.
I could really see, since those already have a color pair, color identities. Kentorius could potentially be the first of some of these other school, went to school Strixhaven characters
Yeah,
that
possibly.
get their spark and potentially become the faces of Magic. And I really could see that with some of these other cards, like the Simone, right? I think she was another one.
Yep. Yeah,
Um,
Zimone has appeared in a number of things, and actually, if you go
Mhm.
back to Strixhaven, she appeared in like 7 or 8 different cards. Like, yeah,
Yep.
she was very much the face of that set. Yeah.
So
And
it
I
could be a
think
possibility.
in their plan they said that we were going back to Strixhaven, right? For a future
I believe
standard
so.
set. So
I think we're going back to Arcavios.
Arcavios,
They
sorry.
didn't specify that it would be Strixhaven specifically, but we're going back to that plane. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So that should be interesting. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, you might be onto something there because those characters are all very well defined and they've been getting a lot of screen time as of late. So that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I could see Dina eventually getting their own card and stuff like that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Cool. But yeah, there are a million other cards that we could touch on. I understand that we are running late. I want to do one last one if you don't mind, everybody.
Of course.
Yeah, what you got?
There's one card that has become, as I understand it, a CEDH staple, partner commander, who is getting a card here, and it's a pirate. Malcolm, the alluring scoundrel. So I got okay. So
I'm
now,
a fan of this card actually, so I'm glad that you're talking about it.
Yeah, I feel like yeah, I don't know. It reads like it could be strong. So it's a 2/1 flash flyer for 1 and a blue. Whenever Malcolm Alluring Scoundrel deals combat damage to a player, put a chorus counter on it. Draw a card, then discard a card. If there are 4 or more chorus counters on Malcolm, you may cast the discarded card without paying its mana cost. So it's it's a 2-power flying flash for 2. That alone is already looking pretty decent, right? And you get a loot every time you slap. And if you slap 4 times, you can start free casting stuff just cuz.
So for me, this card is a little underwhelming. The reason why I say it's underwhelming is because we kind of have a card like this already in standard with a Yara's Outrider or something like this. It's from Aftermath. It's 2 mana for 2/2 menace, and it does the same thing in terms of getting a counter every time it does damage. And then when you get to 4 counters, you get the Demonic Tutor, right? And the reason Oathsworn, there you go.
Oathsworn, yeah.
And the reason why I say it's similar is because this card has not the dice to removal specific sort of argument, but the dice to cut down argument.
Right. Yeah.
And I kind of think that it's also getting outshined by Fairy Mastermind, which is in standard and is relatively the same mana costs, right? It's 2 mana also for the 2/1. Yep. And it has flash, and it has flying, and it has the ability to draw extra cards when your opponent draws. So it's kind of like, what effect do I want more? Do I want to be able to flash, attack, loot, possibly cast, a card for free 4 turns from now, which I might be Sunfold by then. Or do I want the ability to maybe draw a couple extra cards off of a card like Mastermind when my opponents are playing cards like, Dread Knight, right? The adventure side to draw a card, lose a life, or Up the Beanstalk, enters the battlefield, draw a card. I like the card. I think it's good. I think it's pretty good designed. I just think in standard, it's currently outshined by other cards that exist.
I like it. I agree with everything that you said, though. I think that it could fit into those same decks, maybe even fit into the like a mono blue type deck. I think that if you're getting too greedy by saying that you're going to cast a Breach the Multiverse with this card, I think that's when it starts to become questionable. But let's say this card just sits out, hits a couple times, and if it does take one of the removal spells, as always, it means one of your other creatures isn't going to get hit, right? And if this card obviously stays, then maybe just for some value, you hit a Kaido, I hit a Graveyard Trespasser. Yeah, those cards aren't like game winning, but obviously getting these extra free cards is always a big deal. So I think that the flash is what really makes this card playable. I think that there's a chance that it could get played as maybe like a 2 of, just because it's like a little cheap card that with some counter backup, you just hit them a few times, and then now all of a sudden you can start countering their start casting cards for free and holding up your counter spells, which are important when they maybe do come down. That sun falls. So I think overall it's a card that I think you shouldn't think too highly of.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't be surprised if it does get played and it does something
Mhm.
in a Demir or another blue base type strategy. And let's not forget it's
Yeah.
a pirate, so obviously this and breaches is pretty decent because you can play this into breaches and then get your treasure, loot, and then later on have mana to cast cards for free, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
No,
there's
if
definitely potential.
if pirates become a thing, then this absolutely slots in. I think that's I think that's fair to say. But no, and and I agree with absolutely everything that's been said here. I think if you go into deck building thinking I'm going to break this card, you're probably gonna have a rough go of it. If you already have a tempo deck that is likely Dimir, like that's kind of where our heads go because that's a proven strategy. This all of a sudden, being a part of that puzzle. What I'd probably do is I'd probably still be running 4 Fairy Masterminds and maybe 2 of this card.
Yeah.
Exactly like you're saying. Because most games it's not going to do much. It's just going to eat removal and you're going to move on throughout your day. But in the one game where it doesn't, maybe you get to free cast a Shieldred or a Kaido off this, or even a Go Over the Throat while you're leaving your counter mana open. Like,
If your opponents
all
have to
gravy.
decide
Like,
on killing
that's
this in Rafine, which one are they killing?
I mean,
If you play this at instant speed and then they waste their removal and then you untap and resolve Rafine, they're going to feel pretty bad that they wasted their cut down on the Malcolm instead of the
Very true.
Rafine. So
Ooh.
I think that this card could potentially, I mean, that's the same thing with Fairy Mastermind, right? It's in the same vein where it's like you flash in the Fairy Mastermind. It's like, are you going to waste a cut down on this, or are you going to wait for me to play a real card for you to maybe waste your cut down? So I think that it definitely gets some breathing room depending on what the player wants and depending on the game state. So obviously, powerful effect, cheap card, pretty much does everything you want to do. It's just, where does it fit in? Is it going to get played? Are there other cards that already do what it's doing better?
Actually, could it replace Rona in Esper Legends, do you think? I mean, it's dealing more damage and it's flash. Like, that's relevant, right?
Yes. I think Rona probably draws more cards because the tap untap.
And it also has the ability to flip over, so it becomes like a real threat. Whereas like this by itself doesn't get bigger.
Well, and Rona
the
doesn't
cards
die
you
to the
cast have to
frog,
be
which
better.
we know is going to be a thing. So that's
Yeah, also true.
So
anyway.
I
That
mean,
is just a thought experiment there, just a little idea. I don't
it's
know.
still a good card. It's going to be like Raven Man, where maybe you play it every once in a while and it does some things, but it's not like the ideal game-breaking card that you want. And then it falls out of flavor. Then maybe in the future, it's a pirate card, like I said. So there's potential for it in different things. It's just like I said, like, is this card going to get played? Maybe it's a powerful card, but it's asking a lot.
Raven Man, that's a card that I thought was going to be everywhere. I thought it was going to be Raven Man into Liliana the Veil as far as the eye could see. And nowadays, if I see somebody play Raven Man, I breathe a sigh of relief. Because, like, if your deck can support that card, it does not match up well to whatever I'm doing. This is going to be great. Anyway, and Malcolm could easily be the same way. Where the moment you see it hit the battlefield, you're just like, oh, you're going to try to go in on that? Great. I'll get around to killing that later. I don't even need to worry about it right now.
I can take 2 hits off that and not care.
Not even care.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So, interesting stuff. Yeah, it's an interesting design. It looks like a powerful card, but it's
It reminds me of fight rigging in
line
the
up well
sense
right
that
now.
you have to build your deck correctly for that card to be good. Because if you build your deck wrong, like that card probably goes in it's better in a reanimator shell. It's better in a deck that wants the graveyard because you're going to be pitching cards anyways. So if there's a deck that wants that, then that's where that card's going to be, right?
Well, and also if you're in a situation that can proliferate, then all of a sudden it looks a lot better. And then all of a sudden you might be able to play it in the same kind of a tempo shell alongside Ayara's Oathsworn, or the Mercurial Spelldancer is the other one. From All We Want that can allow you to like copy spells. Like there are, I don't know. I feel like there might be some kind of a tempo proliferate thing that Malcolm could fit in. I just don't know that it's good enough. And like at the end of the day, you get to a point where it's like, all right, I free cast this, but I could have just ramped into it. So why'd I bother? And I don't know that you have to jump through so many hoops and make so much stuff happen that it becomes harder than just casting those spells,
At least it costs 2 mana.
Only cost 2 mana.
A lot
True.
of cards he talked about today that if, when, and where, and they cost more than 2 mana. So.
Oh yeah, I mean the floor on this thing is you play it on 2 mana on your opponent's end step, and then they spend removal on it. Like, that's fine. Dude did his job. Like, you know, that's a piece of removal that's not hitting your next thing. So, all right. Anyway,
this set's
stuff.
great. I think
I
this
like
set's going to be awesome. I really think this set's going to make a difference in Standard. I'm expecting at least 2 new decks this time rather than just 1 new deck like Eldraine brought. Yeah. And there's just so many good cards. Like, there's so many cards we didn't even get to talk about. And
we haven't even talked about caves and all that. There's a ton. There's so much going on. Yeah.
This set's going to be almost 100% positive this set's definitely going to do something.
Yeah. I'll be shocked if it doesn't.
And so a couple of reminders for everybody about Ixalan coming up, right? I know we said that the streamer event is going to be on November the 9th, so make sure to check us out for that. But also that means pre-releases in paper are coming up that same weekend.
Yeah, they're coming on the 10th.
10th, 11th, 12th, this pre-release weekend. So I'm excited to play with new Ixalan cards in Limited. I usually go and stream like the pre-releases from my LGS, so it's always a fun time. And then it would be released on Arena that following Tuesday, which is the 14th. So we are only 2 weeks out from Ixalan. But don't worry and don't fret. There is another Magic the Gathering set that's coming out before Ixalan. If you don't know, that's the new Lord of the Rings set coming out in paper. In fact, next week, by the time you've heard this, on Friday, this Friday coming up, is Lord of the Rings set Part 2 Holiday Edition. So check that out if you want to open up some cereal cards.
And then... Yeah, so that's something to be hyped about. Don't forget, there's also Fallout coming up. Those are going to be out there. Also, did you hear about the new Marvel thing that's happening now too? Like, the hype train has no brakes.
I love it. I'm just like numb and used to it now. That I'm like, yes, more Magic. I'm like, this is great. It's gotten to a point that I don't even know what all the cards are, and and that's actually kind of fun, honestly, because like we kind of get used to like predictability. But now there's so much stuff that the predictability is kind of gone out the window, and it's like, oh, look at all this stuff. So I'm excited for it. It's going to be cool. I'm just there's so much to look forward to. I do want to give a quick update as well on the Pizza Box tournaments right now. We are waiting for Arena to get the direct challenge glitch fixed. As soon as that gets fixed, we will be announcing our November schedule and when the Jankathon will take place. I know everybody that's been invited to that is definitely waiting. Obviously, right now, this is stuff that's out of our control. And, you know, as soon as we get more information, as soon as something moves, we're definitely going to let you know immediately. And we'll be able to get all that information out for you guys. And then, you know, we can go back to doing 3 free tournaments a month with cash prizes. I know everybody loves them. I know I love doing it. Really means a lot to me, really means a lot to the community. So, you know, once that comes back, we're definitely going to be doing that hype train as well. So
heck yeah. And for anybody who's not familiar, right now, as of this recording, for the last few weeks or so, there's been a bug on Arena that occasionally will cause a challenge to just fail. And if those 2 people try to send a challenge in a number of different ways, it just will not go through. It is obviously it's outside of our control, and as you can imagine, trying to run a tournament where that may crop up.
We had a finals where the 2 people couldn't match.
Yeah,
and that was the finals was they couldn't even play. So I've even been hit with it more than one way.
I've had and I've run afoul of it as well. It's sporadic.
You guys play direct challenges with your viewers, so you know you're being affected by it as well.
The last couple of weekly like viewer challenge days that I've had, the last few Fight Me Fridays, it has come up like multiple times. Yeah, it absolutely has. It is what it is. Yeah.
I was even watching. There was another tournament taking place over the weekend. Literally half of their competitors could not direct challenge each other, and there was like.
That's why we had to cancel the event.
People, but
we can't have that happen. That's why we had to cancel the event.
Yeah.
Like it's
when it's just like community for fun, messing around when it happens, it's a bummer, but we can move on. obviously, if it's a tournament and competitive integrity is on the line and there are prizes on the line, we can't.
$2,500 on the line. It's our championship tournament.
Yeah,
we're not going to take any risks and just having people just lose randomly, considering
No
they've
way.
been waiting for 3 years for this event. So
yeah, we can't do that.
there is a light at the end of the tunnel. JC Hill did advise the arena team about it. So they are working on it. So either I'm expecting the update for Ixalan or potentially another random update happening during the week, and this is fixed. Hopefully sooner than later, but we do want the pizza box tournaments to come back
Absolutely.
to full capacity and keep that train rolling.
100%. So yes, so thank you for that update. That's important stuff. So yeah, I would appreciate that. So with that, we are going to go ahead and bid you all a very fond adieu. It is relatively late at this moment when we're recording this, and it was not when we started, as you can see from the timestamp. So before we go, guys, could you let people know where they can find you on the internet and what they can expect to find when they get there?
Yeah, so you can find me. My name is Carlo, or CFavretto_Jr. on all the platforms. I stream standard mostly on Twitch. Content is based on what viewers are submitted for me to be able to play and climb that ladder. And on the other social platforms, you can find other content, whether that's cringe videos on TikTok or Instagram posts, or I'm definitely on the Twitters. So follow me on X or whatever the heck the platform is called now, and even Threads, because that platform still exists. But definitely check me out.
And you can find me. I haven't really been making too much content lately between the tournaments, kind of not doing anything, and my personal life has been taking a little bit of break. But I stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/HollywoodPizza, usually in the mornings, 5-6 a.m. during the week, and then Sundays is going to be 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm also known as Pizza Box MTG. You can find me on YouTube, where we do videos of the tournaments and gameplay videos in general. There's going to be tons of gameplay videos of early access, so definitely check out the channel for that. And you can kind of just find me on Twitter, hanging out on the internet, someone's chat on Twitch. Usually kind of just like everywhere, just hanging out. And yeah, gonna get back on that content train here pretty soon. So definitely be on the lookout for that.
Love it. Yeah, and you can find me over on Twitch, twitch.tv/hammox42. I'm also on the Twitters, posting way more over there than I have in recent memory. So that is super duper cool, playing all kinds of silly jank nonsense. And over on my Twitch channel especially, we do a lot of community stuff. I do Tuesday Brews Day, which is viewer submitted decks on Tuesdays, and then on Fridays I have Fight Me Friday when Arena decides to cooperate, and it's viewer challenges all day. So tons of fun. But yes, thank you, gentlemen. Always a pleasure. And with that, everybody, have a phenomenal rest of the day, morning, noon, night, whatever time it is for you. I hope it's a good one. And we will be back here next week to talk about just more fun stuff. I'm looking forward to it. So stay janky,
what's
everybody.
Gonna happen next week?
I know. Who knows? We're gonna discuss the 3 new products that get announced between now and then.
And there's gonna be a big magic change tomorrow when we've already recorded the podcast. So tomorrow's gonna be a new type of booster introduced.
Yep. Yeah. Now that we've consolidated to the play booster, we're gonna be adding the exactly.
We're doing the real booster.
Yeah. This is just the just booster.
The competitive booster featuring 3 rares and a mythic. Retailing at $8.99. But anyways,
exactly.
We'll catch you guys next time. Stay safe,
Later, everybody.